Sorry we are running late, but I'll go ahead and call this October 18th, 2021 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks everyone for coming this evening. We'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance. And Jake, why don't you lead us this evening? Thank you, Jake. We'll move on to communications from the public. Just as an FYI, we are in a hybrid meeting tonight. We have folks that have called in remotely via WebEx, so we'll be taking public comment and communications from those individuals as well. With that said, if there are any communications from the public, now would be your opportunity. We do have 5 public hearings scheduled, so if you're here to speak on one of those public hearings, please wait until I call that specific hearing. But if there's anything else you'd like to bring to the attention of the council, now's your opportunity, and just name and address for the record when you approach the podium. Thank you. There should be agendas on the back counter there. You bet. Mary.
The handout that I'm passing out is just to reference some comments on the highway corridor. It's a development that you are familiar with, but I want to refer to it in terms of the highway corridor issues. And again, Mary Flowers, Citizens for Better Flathead. What I would like to point out, and since we spoke at the last council meeting on the highway corridor, I feel like it's important to start to bring to your attention, as these things come before you, issues with the highway corridor plan that I think need to be addressed. And in this diagram, if we start at the highway, and you can see the sidewalk and the landscaping that's there, that is on MDOT property. That's their right-of-way. And I am still concerned that we have not, as a city, looked at what if MDOT decides that they want to retain or take back that right-of-way. We haven't really addressed not requiring more of a setback in that event in the future. Next on this development is a landscaped area.
Mary, if you're talking specifically about this land use application, I'd suggest you wait till the public hearing, unless this is specific to the highway corridor.
This is specific to the highway corridor, and I understand the
Thank you.
Public hearing is closed. I'm not speaking to this. Yep. I'm using this as an example because it's fresh in all of our minds.
Proceed. Thanks.
Thank you. The next area is a buffer area, but if you look, that's also a snow storage area. And there's quite an extensive parking lot here that will have need for snow storage. I went back and looked at the corridor plan today. There's no reference to standards for snow storage. And I think that's an inappropriate area to be putting snow storage right up front by the highway. Then if you look next, there are lines for parking spaces. And our regulations say that we should not have parking between the front of the building and the highway corridor. And yet, this proposal has that in it. It also has a frontage road, which I went back and looked at the plan, and there's terms that say a cross or backage road. Well, there's no definition for what a crossroad is, and so I don't know why this would be allowed under the corridor plan. And I think it's these kind of details that really highlight the need to go back and look really specifically at what that plan will do and won't do. The other thing, the orientation of this building with the long parking lot behind on the side of the building puts the majority of the parking very visible from the highway corridor. And the goal of that plan is to create and to preserve kind of the view shed along that corridor. And again, I think we need to look at the standards in that corridor plan. And I know that you're planning to have another meeting, but I think before we have just a public hearing, we need some workshops to really be able to flesh out on specifics. I'm concerned when the recent proposal came through for the, I forget I think it's the Wolf Auto Repair or shop that came in. Nice to have a new business in town, but it's my understanding that they were told they didn't have to comply with, because they were an existing business, they wouldn't have to comply with the corridor plan. Those kind of issues need to be fleshed out, and so I just want to give you a very, early heads up that I really think that there's a lot in this plan that needs to be fleshed out more. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Who's next? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Susan Okonski. I live at 1035 State Park Road here in Whitefish. And I wanted to visit a little bit about the recycling that you're suggesting to be mandatory. I'm not opposed.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. That's actually scheduled for a public hearing, so we'll have to call that to receive your comments.
Okay.
We'll hopefully get to it quickly.
All right.
But it's last on the list, so I can't guarantee it. Who's next, please?
Evening, Sean Frampton. I think it's 530 West 19th Street here on behalf of Whitefish 57 Hotel. So my client called me after the planning board meeting a little bit concerned about what he'd heard or what they had heard. And so I showed up last council session to listen, and then I got concerned. So I kind of wanted to share a couple comments and don't want to get all legal. Because I respect you guys so much, and I know you guys have discretion in these things, but when looking at these things from our perspective, my perspective, one of the terms that I don't often understand is the words arbitrary and capricious. But I'll tell you what the court has said about them, just adjectives that are used: random, unreasonable, seemingly unmotivated, impulsive, and clear error of judgment. So I know the city has said by its zoning that a hotel is allowed in the spot where they're proposing it, but we have two council members on record saying they don't want a hotel there. But collectively, the city has said it's to be there. We have this planning report which says that the MDT, which has studied this, said that at full build out, including with a hotel, there will be a minimal impact on the transportation system. And I've seen 4 findings in what you guys might be considering tonight, which say that there's adverse access, inadequate access, and excessive traffic. And there's simply no basis for this, at least in the findings. It's all generalization, so there's no evidence, there's no data, there's no studies, there's nobody to tell you that, no traffic engineering, and also with the finding about it might not be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, the staff report says that it is compatible with the neighborhood. Again, it's a generalization without any basis for it. So I just asked you to consider those thoughts tonight in your deliberation.
Thanks, Sean. Further public comment tonight?
Joe Courtney, 535 Colorado, Whitefish. One thing was one to address was and it's too bad we lost the inclusionary housing. It's sad, but what I'm not sure of, but I have not seen any record of, is that whenever the city takes money in lieu of that developer providing the inclusionary housing, affordable housing, that money in my mind should have automatically gone into a fund to buy land in which to build affordable housing, and I don't see a record of that money going there. It gets split up into different things, and it should have specifically gone for land to build affordable housing on, or workforce housing, one or the other. The other thing is e-recycling, and it's none of the reports that I read that have talking about how they're going to do the recycling address the issue of, I think there should be just like the resort tax, rather than put the burden on all the citizens of Whitefish. I think there should be another 0.5% tax or 1% tax levied on goods in the city, just like the resort tax. And then that would go towards a recycling program that the city can then manage. And I'm not sure who the recycler is going to be. News article about Republic lately about overcharging. That was in the news.
Joe, I don't mean to interrupt, but if you're here to comment on the curbside recycling service, if you don't mind waiting till that public hearing, that'd be great, just so we get your comments on the record.
Okay, so I know it's not in the agenda for the 0.5% or the 1%, so I'm proposing it.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Jake?
My name is Jake Howe. I live at 846 Highland Avenue, Whitefish, and I'm going to save most of my comments for the public hearing on the hotel, but listening to him reminded me, if you just bear with me for 60 seconds, it'll save me the time to write a letter to the editor. But I think it's occurred to me that a possible solution or beginning of a solution to the employee housing problem would be for the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Association to change its bylaws temporarily for 2 years and take its $750,000 annual budget and put that $1.5 million as seed money for employee housing, and have as a condition that the rooms are leased by the employers and subleased to the renters. That way the city would have no problems with renters. And I also would have limits as to the number of rooms or units that individual employees can rent, so that small employers can rent spaces as well. And I think the paid director of the Florida Visitors and Convention Bureau could go on leave, and he could be on loan to the housing authority with his organizational skills and marketing skills and things, and because he's paid, and he can continue to be paid. And I know as a part-time Uber drive, it sure doesn't make any money, but I love Whitefish, and I'm a writer and editor, and I stay home alone. It gives me a chance to talk to people, and for the first time I'm hearing complaints about the motels. Unclean rooms, can't get clean towels, surly desk crews, and these are some of our nicer hotels, and I'm almost positive that the lodging facilities could get on board with this. So I thought I'd just throw that idea out there while I'm standing here, and then I won't have to write a letter to thanks.
Thanks, Jake. Further public comment tonight? Rhonda?
Rhonda Fitzgerald, 412 Lupfer Avenue. I was on the B2, B3 committee that worked for years on appropriate uses in the different zones. And at the time that we were wrangling with the B2, because people are always trying to add more uses, my understanding was that a conditional use permit was a matter of grace. You didn't have a right to that use in the B2. B3 is the general business district where all uses are appropriate, but in other districts where a conditional use permit is a possibility, it's a matter of grace. And I think a previous comment implied that it's a right if it's listed as possible with a CUP. And that isn't how we understood it at the time that we were discussing uses in the B2 and the B3. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhonda. Who's next? Further public comment? Michelle, anything online? Any volunteer board reports from the audience? Not seeing any. How about the council? Anything to report on this week? Not seeing any. We'll move on to our consent agenda. You have the minutes attached from the regular and as well as special sessions from October 4th. Any additions or edits to the minutes? With that said, can I have a motion for approval,
I would
please?
move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Counselor Norton. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, which brings us on to our first public hearing of the evening, which is a continuation from the October 4th, 2021 public hearing, which is closed now. We'll go to item 6A, consideration of a request from Rimrock Companies LLC for a CUP to develop a hotel at 21 Headman Lane, and the property is zoned in our WB2, which is our secondary business district. Wendy.
All right, good evening. So at the last council meeting, after the public hearing was closed, the council passed a motion to postpone action on the application until this meeting and directed staff to come back with some findings of fact for denial, and those are attached to your packet. I just wanted to point out a couple of items. During the hearing, there were some questions asked about the traffic study for the Whitefish 57 neighborhood plan versus the traffic study for this particular subdivision, and specifically about this hotel. And there are two separate projects. The Whitefish 57 neighborhood plan was a big 57-acre growth policy amendment, and it was much larger than this smaller particular subdivision. So it's a different piece of property. This was included in that overall one, but this is a much smaller subset of that overall project. So different project, different applicants, different uses, different project entirely. And then I also, I guess, just wanted to point out too that MDT did accept their traffic information. So I have a site plan up there for you, and then Rebecca had called me with some questions, and so I've made some graphics if those are helpful for you, but I think that's all I have. Staff is still recommending approval.
Frank.
Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong, that traffic study that was done for the prior, that also included, in fact, an extension of Baker Avenue and that traffic relief
Yep.
Through that process.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this property and subdivision, Michelle, could you go to the third slide? I think that's the plat. You'll see where the lot is, that southeast corner. There is another lot to the west. It does have an easement across it for a future Baker Avenue extension. That arc is the eastern edge of that right-of-way at what Baker Avenue could potentially be. But this project and property does not go to that new Baker Avenue extension that does not exist.
Further questions, Frank? Further questions from the council? The public hearing is closed. You do have a resolution in the packet denying the CUP for the 85-room hotel. We'll need to act on that resolution one way or another, up or down. Discussion, or I would like to start with a motion to keep the meeting moving along. Ben.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion that does three things. The first would be a denial of WCUP 21-19. The second would be the adoption of the resolution number 2143.
Go ahead, Ben, sorry.
And the third is I would also like to modify resolution 2143.
Let's go ahead and get a second on the table, and then we can
Okay,
deal with amendments from there.
sounds good.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. Ben.
So I would additionally like to offer another motion then to modify resolution 2143, section 1, in the section that describes growth policy compliance, and the additional findings of fact supporting this to state that the proposed project is not in compliance with the growth policy because the proposed project in this location does not match the scale, character, small town feel, and address the community needs and challenges as outlined in the city-county growth policy. And I have more to say if anybody would.
So that would be amendment to finding, correct me, section 1.
So there's,
If you can,
yeah, section 1A where it talks about growth policy compliance.
and what page is that on the packet, Ben?
Packet page 81.
Okay. That would be an amendment to the findings. Is there a second to that friendly amendment? Seconded by Councilor Norton. Ben, would you like to speak to that?
Sure.
Okay.
So I sat and thought about this one for a while, and one of the first things that I think is true is if you ask the citizens of Whitefish, does this proposed project match our community vision in this location? I believe 99 out of 100 would tell you no, it doesn't. And then I think about, well, why is this project here and why is it in front of us? And so I went back and I read the growth policy again, our highest level policy document. And it says, and I highlighted two quotes that really stuck out to me. It says, the citizens of Whitefish value the scale, character, and small town feel of the community and will preserve those values as the community grows. And it also says, we believe that good growth provides us with the means to address community needs and challenges such as affordable housing, infrastructure, development, and does not exacerbate them. This is from the vision statement at the top of the growth policy. So I do not think, if you follow the logical conclusion of, if you allow any hotel here, does this mean that we would have a box hotel in every corner in Whitefish? And personally, I don't believe that is the vision that's espoused in this policy document. And so I believe, in my view, and I believe most of the citizens would agree, that the project proposed is simply not in line with our community vision. And I think it's important that the resolution that's in front of us reflects that fact. And I would also say I agree with the traffic concerns brought forth as well. But I think that's where it talks here that blanketly says this is in compliance with our growth policy. I do not think that's true, and I think it should be stated as such.
Thank you, Ben. Further comments on the motion? I will review Ben's motion so it's clear for the council and for the record. It was to deny WCUP 21-19. Further, it was to approve Resolution 21-43, denying the conditional use permit. And then thirdly, amending Section 1A regarding growth policy compliance per Ben's rationale provided up here on the dais for the public record. Are there any further comments or discussion? Rebecca.
I do want to apologize to the applicants for saying that we don't need any more hotels. I was really tired because I'd gotten up at 2 a.m. and I hadn't slept much, and so sometimes when I'm tired I don't talk very well. I would agree with, that was an inappropriate blanket statement. We will have more hotels in town, and but what I meant when I said that was that we are dealing with an unprecedented housing crisis, and that I feel like sometimes if we keep approving projects that don't contribute to those solutions, we're just going to make that worse. And so I did quite a bit of research on this today. I did speak to the traffic engineering firm that had done the study. I talked to Bridger about the legalities of turning left from there, and then I talked to Wendy quite a bit about whether or not there was a possibility of a Baker Street extension at some point in the near future so that it would make up for the traffic issues that I think are going to be compounded with this project. If it continues to go forward, there would be a bank, a restaurant, and a shopping retail area as well. So the traffic issues will only get worse because there's 2 other properties for sale out there too. So it will be developed. It'll just have quite a bit of traffic, and the only option that I thought about that we could possibly do to mitigate the concerns of 70% of the traffic going north would be to have a right turn only lane, but then you'd have to do a U-turn somewhere. So anyways, that's all I have to say, I guess.
Thanks, Rebecca. Further comments on the motion? Frank?
John, just some clarification. Are we voting on Ben's amendment to the resolution or all three?
All three. We'll take that as one motion and one vote. Further comments? Frank?
Yeah, I think I understand DOT's position, or at least their stated position with respect to the traffic based on the prior studies, but I think the prior studies were in effect flawed. They took into account an extension of Baker Avenue to accommodate much of the traffic that would come out of this development of this particular area as a whole. So I challenge those findings of the prior study done under different circumstances. And so I don't think they're applicable under these circumstances, given that there is no proposal for an extension of Baker Avenue to adjust or accommodate some of the 500-plus trips they expect a day out of this place. So I think traffic is a disqualifying problem for the development of this particular parcel without a Baker Avenue, and certainly with this higher use. So I'm going to find myself in a position where I'm going to have to support Ben's motion, and I think it's just the right thing to do for this community at this time.
Further comments? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Michelle. We'll move on to item 6B, which will be ordinance 21-16, an ordinance approving the 38 Central Hotel planned unit development, which will overlay lots 6 through 10 of Block 27 in the downtown to develop a 3-story commercial building with a 40-suite boutique hotel, including a bar and a lounge at 38 Central Avenue in Whitefish, and this will be on a first reading. Dave.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this proposal before you is a planned unit development for lots 6 through 10 on Block 27 for a 3-story commercial building, which would include a 40-suite boutique hotel, including a bar and a lounge. The total building footprint is 16,250 square feet. Currently, those lots are vacant. They've been vacant for a long time. At that location, it's zoned WB3. It's our downtown business district, our Old Town business district location. So the first floor of this proposed hotel would be a restaurant and bar, as well as areas for retail services and a hotel lobby. Second and third floor would contain hotel suites, and then there'd be a rooftop area that'd be open to the public, associated with both the restaurant and the hotel. They're proposing 42 underground parking spaces. It should be noted that hotels are a permitted use in the WB3 zone. The size of the building would necessitate a conditional use permit because it exceeds 7,500 square feet. And then there would also be a conditional use permit requirement for a bar and lounge. However, conditional use permits may be considered with a PUD as long as the conditions are met for the PUD application for the CUP. As far as the plan unit development, why they chose this route is they are requesting a deviation to the building height design standards of the WB3. While the building will only be 35 feet tall, which is less than the maximum of 45 feet, they are asking for 3 stories within that 35 feet rather than the requirement that only 2 stories be within 35 feet. So again, the zoning deviation that's being requested, and there's a requirement that there's a 20-foot setback if a building exceeds 35 feet. And so they don't want that 20-foot setback on their building, but rather having 3 floors within that 35 feet off the street. In exchange for their deviation from the standards, they are proposing some community benefits, which is what the PUD chapter requires. One of them is implementation of the Downtown Business District Master Plan. Through the development of a boutique hotel, and we'll talk about this a little later, but the Downtown Master Plan did call for a boutique hotel on Block 27 of downtown Whitefish. The 42 on-site underground parking spaces that they're proposing would be a benefit in the such that WB3 zoning does not require any parking for commercial uses, only for residential uses that are above commercial. or residential uses that are on both floors. They also are proposing to donate $500,000 to the Whitefish Housing Authority for workforce housing, dedicated for the Snow Lot project, which is going to create 26 workforce housing units. And then they're also proposing an optional 1% lodging and food fee at the hotel that would go towards Whitefish workforce housing projects for 5 years. And that's similar to what the Whitefish Lake Lodge currently gives to the Whitefish Lake Institute. As far as looking at the bar and a lounge requirement, there are several bars and lounges in that vicinity. It's associated with the restaurant. And then again, they're looking at the bulk and scale in excess of 7,500 square feet, which would require a conditional use permit. We'll talk about that in a little bit. That property is surrounded by WB3 zoning on all sides, just in that location. And then we did send out a notice to landowners within 150 feet as required under the code. We had no comments before the planning board, but since then we had 6 letters of support, including letters from the owners of the Great Northern Bar and Tupelo, as well as a letter from the Whitefish Housing Authorities in support of the donation of $500,000. We did have one letter that was concerned about the height deviation, and an additional letter came in today that was opposed to the hotel, which I believe you have a copy of on the table if Michelle put that on there. For planning and development, that is a zone change, and so we have to look at certain requirements for review of that, including whether it's consistent with the Whitefish growth policy, a downtown master plan, as well as our zoning ordinances. And again, this is in the WB3 zone. Hotels are permitted use in that zoning district, so that is consistent with the zoning. They are asking for that height deviation, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more, but that would be one of the deviations that they're asking for. And while the height would remain consistent with other buildings in the downtown, they are going to ask for 3 stories within that 35 feet rather than the requirement for 2. As far as the planning and development, it's a commercial planning and development, which we look at for special, unique projects, promoting advantages of large-scale site planning and efficient use of land, facilitating economic arrangement of buildings and such things. And so the planning and development has particular standards that we have to look at in order to approve a planning and development. Are there environmentally sensitive areas on the site? And there are none on this particular site. They are going to protect existing street trees when that project is developed. Is there wildlife habitat in that area? There is none because it's an urban downtown project. As far as open space requirements, it's not required to provide open space as it's an urban development with no setback requirements. They will be providing some rooftop open space for their patrons and the public, however. Does it protect the character and quality of existing neighborhoods? It is located in the downtown commercial core in the Old Town Central District, and it's going to fit in with other Central Avenue commercial buildings with a similar size and look. When it comes to street continuity, there are no new streets being proposed. This is infill, but it is going to maintain the urban downtown core streetscape with benches and street trees and the other amenities that are also found on Central Avenue. Will provide attractive, high-quality streetscapes with landscaping, bikeways, street trees. Again, that is all stuff that they're proposing as part of their development. And then will the proposed development provide pedestrian transit, bicycle facilities? And again, they're not developing any new streets. They are providing underground parking, and they're going to add bike racks in front of the facility. With regard to affordable housing, again, they're offering to provide $500,000 to the Whitefish Housing Authority, specifically earmarked for affordable housing project that the Whitefish Housing Authority is working on at the Snow Lot, as well as that voluntary 1% tax that would go towards workforce housing projects in Whitefish for up to 5 years. Architectural Review Committee is going to look at the building architecture. No residential uses are being proposed. As far as public facilities and infrastructure, they're not proposing new infrastructure. However, they are going to need to pay a cash in lieu amount of $8,000 for stormwater facilities. And then more importantly, is this consistent with the growth policy? And looking at the growth policy, that is the area that's considered core commercial, part of the downtown. Major uses are hotels are listed under the major uses that are proposed for that area. And then as far as the urban forms, according to the growth policy, it talks about being dense, multi-level, with street connectivity, zero setbacks, accessible human-scale storefronts, pedestrian scales, on-street parking, but parking serving employees and residents is located in parking structures or small lots accessed from the alleys, with high-quality architecture. And so looking at these particular things, it is a core commercial project. It outlines a major use, provides a dense multi-level development with zero setbacks. Again, it's a permitted use in that zone. And then there's specific goals and policies found in that growth policy that talk about projects like this, including developing and promoting Whitefish as a year-round convention and destination community, providing amenities for the visitor and employment opportunities. And this will help fulfill that goal number 4 of economic development. There's another policy in there supporting the role of downtown Whitefish as the commercial center of the community through implementation of the Downtown Business District Master Plan, which we'll talk about in a second. Preserving the special character, scale, and qualities of existing neighborhoods while supporting and encouraging attractive, well-designed, neighborhood-compatible infill development. This is infill on an existing vacant lot. And then for new development, infill projects, building height and massing shall be consistent with the scale of existing structures, and that does, again, stay within the scale of existing structures with the height limitations. We mentioned the Downtown Business District Master Plan that was originally done in 2006 with a 2015 update. It was adopted as part of the city's growth policy as a neighborhood plan, and one of the catalyst projects identified for all iterations of the plan was for a boutique hotel on Block 57. On the 2005 plan, it was shown on this half block that they're specifically putting on it, and the possible design would include ground floor retail, a restaurant, a cafe or bar, and a rooftop. And then 35 to 45 rooms. And then with the 2015 update, it was moved a little bit onto the part of the property where, or that block where Marcus currently is, and it's allowed to be an even bigger facility with that entire half a block, with potentially Marcus moving across the street as part of that downtown master plan. So the text of that says, yeah, envisions a boutique hotel and a commercial or residential development over ground floor retail fronting First Street, with 50,000 square feet of lodging on that block and 30,000 square feet of ground floor retail. And then specifically talks about the lodging characteristics of a boutique hotel or extended stay suite would be designed in scale and character with the surrounding architecture, consider the surrounding uses as part of the visitor experience, especially existing nightlife activities, offer street-oriented lobbies and restaurants, not impact the supply of retail or commercial parking. It should include parking on-site for services, valet service parking may be offered off-site, and then not include auto-oriented characteristics. And so this does comply with the downtown master plan, as it will be a boutique hotel on Block 57 or Block 27. Designed in the scale and character of the surrounding architecture. It considers surrounding uses, offers street-oriented lobby and restaurant, includes on-site parking and valet services. And the preliminary designs show no auto-oriented characteristics with vehicle access to the underground parking garage off the alley. As far as the zoning deviations with the building height, again, they're not requesting a deviation to the maximum height of 45 feet as is required under the WB3, but just to the special provisions of the building height section. I think we've covered that enough. And the purpose of that is so that they could bring the hotel to 40 units, which is kind of the price point of making it functional while keeping the ground floor active with the restaurant and retail service space at the street level in accordance with the downtown master plan. Otherwise, they'd have to have hotel rooms on the ground floor as well. Looking at traffic generation, anything that exceeds 200 trips requires a traffic analysis. With 40 rooms, this will generate 334 daily trips when completed in 2023. And then the traffic study that was provided shows it have little impact on the surrounding road system. We did have some concerns that the traffic study required a little more specific additional information, and they did provide that. I put a copy on the table for you guys, and Our Public Works Director has reviewed that and considers that additional information adequate. Looking at the bulk and mass of the building, again, this is something the Architectural Review Committee is going to look at. However, it does fit in with the adjacent other buildings in that area, and it is not out of place with regard to the proposed bulk and mass and scale of the building. And as far as the bar and lounge goes, again, there's not any impacts that will be anticipated with the bar and lounge. And then it does substantially achieve the intent of the PD chapter, and the approval criteria we feel are met as applicable. As far as the requirements for the zoning code amendment, we do feel it meets all the criteria of that. So staff did recommend approval of this to the planning board with 20 conditions of approval. Some of those conditions include just project development conditions with regard to when that gets constructed, with hours of construction activity, noise abatement, and erosion control, and all the other requirements. Then you need to provide a plan for all their off-site and on-site infrastructure to the Public Works Department for any of the connections or other things that will be done as part of that project. They need to do a traffic control plan approved by the Public Works Department prior to the commencement of construction. One of the conditions was an updated traffic impact study will be provided to the Public Works Department, describing the estimated number, distribution, impact of the trips generated. I think that one's already been covered with the additional information they provided. They need to coordinate with Parks Department on existing tree protection, planting, tree species, replanting, watering. Bicycle racks have to meet and match the existing city street furniture. They have to work with the Republic Services on a solid waste design, and that be approved by Public Works and Republic Services. Working on encroachment permits. We're noted that there's going to be a loading zone off of East First Street, and we put a condition on there that only 2 of the on-street parking spaces may be removed for the loading zone, and no off-street or on-street parking may be removed on Central Avenue. They need to submit a engineered stormwater plan to the city, the fee in lieu. And then fire code classification of occupancy shall be equipped with a fire sprinkling system, fire department connection, alarm panels, and utility controls located on or in the building. Ladder access need to be provided to all occupied areas on the roof. And fire access maintained to the roof. Stairwells and underground garage will need standpipes. And then the alleys are the emergency access and shall be maintained at least 20 feet of width for the fire truck. And again, because of the design of the building, the fire marshal did look at that. They do feel like as long as these things are met, they won't have any issues with fighting a fire on there. And some of those standards for the setbacks on the roof were been in the code a long time, and that was based on concerns about fire. They do have to maintain 42 parking spaces on site. If somehow it's deemed unfeasible due to groundwater or structural issues, then they must be provided off-site in a location near enough for the hotel to still provide adequate parking and valet services for their guests. They need to eliminate the interior lot lines through a boundary line adjustment. Everything needs to be dark sky compliant. All mechanical equipment needs to be screened visually and acoustically. Again, they have to get architectural review. That $500,000 donation needs to be provided to the city prior to the building permit issuance to be later dispersed by the city to the housing authority. And we have a condition that they provide a yearly accounting of the proceeds of the voluntary 1% tax and where that money is donated, spent towards workforce housing for 5 years from the date of the certificate of occupancy approval. The PUD is good for 3 years of approval. This did go to the Whitefish Planning Board. The Planning Board did review this. We had one public comment, which was from Will Hagan from the Glacier Restaurant Group. They had concerns about hotel rooms and the public open rooftop above the outdoor patio at the Craggy Range. And he was opposed to height deviations. He also raised some concerns about the parking garage entrance and the service alley because of the service trucks that often block the alley. Planning Board did review that. They did move to recommend approval. They did add a friendly amendment to add an additional condition number 21, that the hotel shall be independently owned and not be a franchise business. And then after that motion, the Planning Board did unanimously recommend approval of this project. I'm glad to answer any other questions, and I know the applicant has a presentation that they want to do that shows a lot of additional information about the architecture and the design of the project.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Any questions for Dave on his staff report? Rebecca?
I don't know, Dave, if I should wait till the presentation. Should I just wait till the presentation's over and then?
Yeah,
ask
we'll
him?
call the applicant to present as we
Okay,
open
and
the
then-
public hearing.
And then I can ask Dave after the.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Further questions from the council? I know Frank had his hand up, then Ben. Yep.
Dave, and maybe this should wait, but is there a indication as to what the head height on the first floor of the building is going to be? I mean, I think the concern from downtown perspective would be that the head height of that floor be consistent with what's required of all the first floors, which I think is 10 feet or more. Is it not?
We don't have requirements for head heights, I mean, other than the minimum building code requirements, but I think that you could say that for the architect, because she'll be given a
Okay.
presentation.
And then, do we know when this donation is to be made to the Whitefish Housing Authority?
Well, the condition on there is that prior to certificate of occupancy, they need to provide that donation to the city.
Okay. And then, one of the conditions of this resolution seems to be that they have offered, and we are expecting, that they're going to provide 42 on-site underground parking spaces. If for any reason, those parking places are not ultimately delivered, does this fail? Does their PUD
Well, again, we
fail?
have added a condition on there that if for some reason they weren't able to do those, that they needed to have a place off-site. So they needed to provide them somewhere in a location that's near enough for the hotel to still provide adequate parking and valet services for their guests. If they can't provide that, then the conditional use permit would be void, because they wouldn't be able to meet all the conditions of approval, or the PUD,
Great, okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Further questions? Ben?
This question might be for Craig, and it has to do with the $8,000 proposed in lieu of stormwater detention. Did I recall you saying at one point that this detention air pond that this is going to is going to need a significant capital improvement coming soon? Is that amount sufficient?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm on or not. I worked with Brent Foley, who is the applicant's engineer, on the impact of this project to that stormwater pond. And then we used the estimated cost of the restoration, and it came up with a number much smaller than $8,000. So the applicant proposed $8,000, which was an order of magnitude more. So we felt that number adequately addressed this project's portion of the work more realistically than that actual mathematical formula. So it's not going to cover all of the project, of course, but it'll be a percentage that will definitely help to get that project done.
Further questions for staff? Not seeing any. Sean, I'm not sure who really addressed. There's quite a few of you here, so I'll turn it over to you. Just name and address for the record, please.
Good
And we'll
guess.
take public comment.
Sean Averill, one of the developers. Thanks, Mr. Mayor and everybody. And Dave, thanks for that staff report. That was excellent. We realize this is a pretty high-profile corner, so we learned some lessons at the Firebrand, not having all the information maybe at the beginning. So we brought an architect in from out of town. Becky here is with Oz. They're out of Denver. They specialize in this kind of urban developments, and so she's here. She has some pretty good plans she can show you guys. We basically try to get everything ahead of time to understand what we're going to need versus maybe what we did at the Firebrand, not knowing some of the stuff. We realize when you develop, there's going to be an impact, and so the housing was what we anticipate is the biggest impact in the town that's needed. So that's where we came up with, the donation and this 1%. The 1% has been working great at the lodge for the Lake Institute, so it was just kind of an idea to continue it. In 5 years, the theory is, well, maybe there's a different need, so we just kind of locked in for 5 and we see how it goes. The lodge is totally voluntary. We just do it because we think it's the right thing to do, so that's kind of the model we followed. The impact on the height is a little confusing, but we're trying to get 3 stories, obviously, in that 35 feet versus 2, but it's only for 20 feet. And I think you guys probably understand how that works, but it's confusing at first how it's only for the first 20 feet off Central. So, you know, you could have a building that looks the same with a double-story lobby, or so from the outside it'll look exactly the same essentially. You're just going to have rooms on that second floor versus a double-high lobby. And that's what the Firebrand has. If you look from Central, there's the lobby is double stories. Now, we don't have the room like the Firebrand. Firebrand has 90 rooms, is 40, it's quite a bit smaller. And we think we did a good job. I'll let Becky kind of present the architecture of it, because that was kind of the whole point. And you guys have questions about the head height and stuff, she's the one. But thank you, I'll be around for questions later.
Thanks, Sean. Welcome, Becky.
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties,
Okay.
but Michelle, I just gave it to her on a thumb drive, so she'll be able to bring it up here in a sec.
Okay. Okay, well, in the meantime, I'm Becky Stone with Oz Architecture. We're at 3003 Larimer Street in Denver, Colorado. So I'll start with that. I'll give a little bit of intro while you're pulling up the slides. But my background, so I've been at Oz since 1998, and Oz is multidisciplinary. We work on a lot of different stuff, but my team is about 40 people that work almost solely on resort and hospitality projects, and even more fun when it's resort and hospitality. So I have a little map that we'll pull up, but we've worked in a lot of communities all over the nation, really on, you know, if you can wear a fleece and bring your skis to work, that's where we like to work. So I like being up here. Been a good experience so far. So I'll go through these kind of quick. I'm happy to answer more questions. Maybe a lot of you have seen them, but a lot of people out there might not have, so just kind of the quick conceptual level. Okay, this is the map I was talking about our experience. So, I mean, one thing that's really important, because we do work across the country on any kind of, you know, resort community, most communities have a very specific identity. So I think one thing when we go through the presentation that we feel very strongly about is we want to make sure we are working with what makes Whitefish Whitefish, and trying to have architecture that blends into this community and isn't, you know, coming from somewhere else. So I'll talk about that a little bit more, but I think that's a philosophy we use everywhere we work. So we did look quite a bit at, you know, what does 38 Central want to be? So it is luxury guest rooms. It is a boutique hotel. So in our world, that's a independent brand or something that's not, you know, 400 rooms with a conference. It's usually 100 rooms or smaller, more upscale kind of product. So I'll go through a little bit of that imagery. A little look and feel of the community up here and what is Whitefish. So we did look at the lifestyle, not just the architecture. So to try to blend all that into why you have visitors for a reason. And we want the hotel to speak to that reason. A little bit of the existing context. So as we studied Whitefish, right, there's really kind of the main street, and then it's kind of blending with a little bit more current context, like the brewery up there on the top right. So how do you kind of mesh those together? And you have some good thoughts on guidelines and things like that, so we looked at that pretty carefully. And you know, how do you make Whitefish Whitefish but still keep all these pieces, and how does it keep evolving with still its Whitefish identity? So we took that existing context and, you know, what's going to be the new identity of this 38 Central Hotel and this parcel, and how do we sort of blend those? So we have a little bit of contemporary and historic meshing together with a bit of history and the railroad, and how do we make that a current interpretation and a little bit more refined, a little bit more sophisticated for this property. One of the things as we head into that, for kind of Main Street architecture, traditionally there was a base, a middle, and a top, right? So the base really inviting, open indoor to outdoor, active streetscape. The people, pedestrians are welcome to come in. It is going to be a public realm on that street, so we want people to come in and experience the building and participate, eat, drink, and hang out there. So large storefronts. Right now we're showing 14 feet to answer your question from before. But it has a higher floor-to-floor, higher ceiling height at that level. The canopies, of course, so we have a few different kinds of canopies, but you have that very unique covered canopy on your sidewalks that not every community has, so how to embrace that and make that part of the architecture. The middle is a little bit quieter, but there are balconies, the rhythm of the windows and the scale and the proportions that you have in Whitefish. We're trying to take nod of that and put that into the building. And then the top, so we do have a roof deck. Usually the buildings in this town, they finish with some kind of cornice or interesting top, so we'll talk about that a little bit too. I think everybody knows the site, so it's at East First Street and Central. So this talks a little bit about the zoning and the setbacks and what Sean was alluding to before. So if you look at the dash line where it says B, where it's labeled B, so the zoning would allow us to go 35 feet, whether we're 2 stories or 3 stories. But the second story in the zoning needs to step back to that, or the third story would have to step back to that dash line. So the massing of the building would be the same. What we're asking for is to not have to step it back, so we can keep those hotel keys in the same envelope. And then the C part that's on top is what's allowed to go above the 45 feet, and it can step back. The 35 feet, sorry. So a little bit about the site and just a narrative. So we sort of have 2 entries. So we have one which we call canopy at restaurant entry, but that's coming off of Central. And we have another canopy, like the large canopy that covers the whole sidewalk coming off of East First. So those are sort of the main entries. All of everything along First and Central is all open to the public. The green kind of teal is our back-of-house kitchen and operations for the hotel. And then we do have off of the alley, we have our entrance to the ramp for parking, a loading, like parking stall, so we can load into the kitchen and our trash. A little stacking diagram here with the program. So we have underground parking, which is the 42 parking stalls below grade. Level 1 is the public space, and then level 2 and 3 are identical with hotel rooms, and then the roof deck on the top. This just shows a little bit bigger what I just talked about, so we can kind of skip through it, but it has the sidewalk and the drop-off areas, and then B, C, and A are all that kind of lobby, food and beverage bar area open to the public. Typical floor of rooms. And the roof deck. So we have, the idea is the roof deck is open to the public for part of it. The hot tubs would be for the hotel guests, but the part labeled D and sort of along Central have fire pits and open seating for people to sit up there. The material palette, we're using pretty authentic materials that you would find in nature, but also up here. A bit more painted or articulation at the pedestrian base, just to give it a little bit more interest. It's not just brick all the way to the ground, using some accent steel, brick and wood to soften it up a little bit.
I don't mean to interrupt, but can you go back one slide and just point out where the ingress and egress to the garage will be located?
On this, you back a couple slides. Well, this is the roof deck. You want to go back to, go.
Whatever's the best schematic.
Okay, so the left side is the alley. The left side of on plan is the alley. And so see on the north, the top left corner of the plan, it says ramp to parking below. So that's coming off of the alley. See where it says E?
Yes.
Yeah, or maybe on the little axon, you can see it, right there. Yeah, so that's the ramp down, right off of
So
the
it
alley.
actually accesses off the alley.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I think I covered that one. Yeah, really looking at the pedestrian realm and making that rich, right? The bike racks, and we would like some street trees in there, so we are breaking up the awnings a little bit just to sneak in some greenery, which I think adds a little dimension and scale to the pedestrian realm. But outdoor seating, nice lighting, places to hang out when it's warm weather, especially. So this is kind of that look. East First Street is to the left on the picture, and Central is to the right. So this, you could kind of see that pedestrian level at the first floor and the sort of 14 feet, and then we go up above that with some rhythm. We felt pretty strongly about undulating the building in and out, so there's kind of a rhythm along Central especially, where every 25 or 30 feet, the facades change, and so to us to push in and pull out the building a little bit to kind of continue that rhythm and not have it just look like one big massive building. So it's brick on the corners, but then it's wood siding in the middle, so the recesses are wood. This is a little bird's eye where you can see the roof deck along Central. We'd like the public on that Central just to get the vibrancy. And then the whole base sort of opens up. And I'll show you a couple vignettes of that. A little closer in view of that roof deck. So this is looking up Central, the other direction. So you can see us in relationship to the brewery. We think that brewery is about the same height as us. And you can kind of see that rhythm we're trying to get with the undulation of the building. And the big canopies, so that's the restaurant entrance, and then First Street has a similar entrance, but we can fit dining out there under that canopy. So this is below that, right? So we have storefront windows that would open up or slide. It's nice to hear the people eating and draw people down that length of Central. And this is like walking up to that from the corner. So we kind of envisioned, we haven't totally laid it out yet, that the bar is on that main corner, so it really does draw people over there. That's it.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Rebecca?
I'm just wondering, have you ever designed, I think it's a beautiful design, by the way, but have you ever designed a big thing like this that is actually going to be built on water? Because we have so much groundwater that I'm kind of worried about the parking, and I know that it's part of the conditions that they can move the parking off site, but I don't know where. But have you ever done any projects like that?
I have, actually. I did, at Squaw Valley, we had to make the building a raft slab. It was like 12 feet thick and had like pop-offs so that if the static pressure of the water got too heavy, it would pop off and come into the garage. So.
How deep was the water there?
We hit water constructing it right away, so we had to pump water out in order to pour the slab, the footings, right? So it had a lot of water.
And then what'd you do? How'd you keep the water from coming back in or trespassing on other properties?
Yeah, so it pumped out. During construction, we had a dewatering, so it pumped out during construction, and then we poured. Literally, it was 12 feet deep of solid concrete, like a raft, right? And that was the footings instead of just having footings, so that the building wouldn't float, right? We had to push it down far enough, and then it has some pop-off valves that are little holes in the side of the garage that the water can come in if it gets too heavy that it's starting to push the building. So we had to engineer it thinking about the water. I also did the Napa Verasa, which is the Weston and Napa Valley, and the garage had to act as an aqueduct for when the Napa River flooded, it had to be able to flood through the garage of the building. So everything had to be elevated above the garage so that the water could go through, and it happened twice, so.
And the buildings
The
are
building
still
stayed, yeah.
standing?
It
Okay,
stood through
good.
an earthquake too, so.
And then the
Well, if you
other,
think about it, Rebecca, like the lodge at Whitefish Lake, for example, I bet the ground
yeah,
foundation level for that parking garage is below the ordinary high water mark of Whitefish Lake.
yeah, I did think of that you guys had some experience with that already.
yep.
But just.
Good point, though.
I don't want it, if we approve something, we don't want it to fail. And we've had
Yeah.
a few projects with quite a bit of water that delayed the completion, and even our city hall had a lot of water. The other thing I was wondering about is the staging. I don't know if the Avrils want to talk about that, but it's such a busy area. How do you stage something like this?
It is a busy. You guys want to talk about it?
Michael Freeman, Director of Development for River Hospitality. You're talking construction staging,
Yeah.
material staging.
Yeah.
We're actually in conversations with Lori Collins with the Whitefish Housing Authority to use the snow lot for staging, and talking with Alan Frankel with Dick Anderson Construction to talk about all the logistics of construction for this project. So it's an ongoing process, but we're going to come up with a complete plan before we start. Excuse me.
Oh, okay. All right. And then the convention center was another question I had. So is there an area in this project that will be able to have conventions?
Sort of. We have if we go to the lobby plan, we have kind of a flexible space. Yeah, this one. So on the C, so we're calling that retail because I think it could be very flexible space. So we could use it as a meeting room. It could be used for a gallery opening. It could host a private dinner. So a coffee shop. Like, I'm not exactly sure what that could be, but the idea would be that you somehow that, so we wouldn't host conventions like
A big
300
convention.
people, but
Okay.
you could have a meeting, occurring in there.
Okay. I guess that's all I have for now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions from the council for the applicants? I had a quick question, just what type of structures would be up to 45 feet? I noticed on the drawings, obviously the elevator shaft, the HVAC systems. Is there anything else in terms of use that will be
Yeah, so
up to 45?
Yeah, you mean what goes above the 35
The
feet?
35, yep.
Yeah, so we've extended the 2 stair cores above and the elevator shafts. So there's a service elevator and then 2 passenger elevators. So that goes up to the top.
So it'd be similar
So-
to like what we see over at Casey's?
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I had. Thanks. Anything further from the applicants? Thanks, Sean. We'll go ahead with public comment and name and address for the record, please. And if you don't mind, we might want to try to keep our comments to 3 minutes or so. We've got quite a big agenda this evening. Jake?
Yeah, my name is Jake Howell again, 846 Highland Avenue, Whitefish, Montana. I'm absolutely opposed to this. And there's 2 reasons. One is sort of abstract, which is really hard to put into concrete terms, and that is quality of life in Whitefish. What I just saw was a presentation on dropping the big city into the middle of a small, close-knit, family-oriented community. Period. I've done over 5,000 Uber trips in the last 4.5 years here in the Whitefish area, and I've been stuck in the traffic jams. I've been hearing the complaints from tourists, and especially from locals, the people going to work. That there's a lot of people that can't afford a car anymore because they want to stay close to the snow bus and keep a place to live and keep their house in Whitefish. I'm going to apologize in advance because we're the kind of people that when we sell something on Craigslist, we don't count the money, we just stick it in our pocket because we don't want to insult the person that we sold the thing to. And I'm going to be a little insulting here. These developers have a very poor history with the city. In 2005, when they were developing the lodge, they wanted to expand the marina from 50 to 85 spots. The city, me, through my representatives, said, okay, but that'll be a public marina, the only one allowed on Whitefish Lake, and you'll have to reserve a certain percentage of your slots to the public. I think it was 25%. They agreed. The quote from Mr. Averill was something like, and I tried to get it today from the microfilch in the library, but I couldn't read it. It was something like, I do not agree that this is a public marina. We're doing this to make money. And what they did, after he agreed to give those public slips to the public, he leased them on 40-year leases to the Iron Horse Homeowners Association so that they could use them as selling points in their development. The only reason he got caught was because Jim Stack at the Whitefish Lake group caught him and pinned him down. Incidentally, on April 1st of 2021, all those leases are supposed to be canceled, and there's supposed to be no reference to any homeowners association or any other preferences on those leases. That might be something we want to check into. These people are shoulder to shoulder already downtown in Whitefish, and there are a lot of everybody I know had a pretty miserable summer in our beautiful town. This would make everything worse. We're talking about 100 people or more. In putting 100 people going in and out of that building in that 2 blocks, when you already can barely move. I had one tourist tell me, this is just like one of those, this is such a charming town, it's just like one of those little towns in Disney World. You know, it's just, I don't like the idea. It's not, it's going to do the citizens of Whitefish have no benefit to the citizens of Whitefish whatsoever, and it's going to exacerbate every single one of our problems, which are almost to an emergency situation. I see no reason why my representatives in the city council should aid in this thing. I don't see what in the world it's going to get us. I wrote an editorial, as a lot of people know, that was a guest editorial in Interlake, came out Saturday. I've had an overflowing amount of reaction from that, and not a single person, everybody says perfect. My husband and I agree with every single point. I mean, it's just like, and everybody finished their texts or their phone calls or their emails with the words thank you. People, and the other comment is, you're wasting your time because they always get their way. I mean, I'm sorry, I apologize for my attitude, but I guess it's fashionable now to speak truth to power, as they say, and those are my feelings, and I'm not alone. You know, all those Uber people I've driven around, the people I talk to, the people that respond to those editorials, the community feels that this is a bad thing for us. It's great for the developers, and those boat slips, by the way, the ones that are supposed to be public at the lodge, they rent for $150 a day. If there's 25 of them, that's $10,000 plus profit a month. Nobody I know is going to pay $150 a day for a boat slip. We can't afford it. This is that kind of thing. It's beautiful, it's slick. I was looking at those first series of photographs, and every single one of them would have been degraded. Every single thing they depicted would have been degraded, will be degraded by this development. And the council can say no. I mean, I sat at the table when that, excuse me for bringing it up, but extraterritorial zoning was called at the time extraterritorial zoning, which became the donut. But I sat at the table when that was done with Abel and Gary Elliott and Jerry Hansen and all these people. And we argued and fought and disagreed, but came to an agreement because we wanted to keep the character of Whitefish the way it is. This destroys the character of Whitefish, in my opinion. And then there's one person I've met who likes it, and that was a realtor that I was talking to at the dog park 2 days ago. And I've really talked to a lot of people about it. So I'm representing those people as well. I know what I'm talking about. And thank you, and my apologies to Mr. Averill, because I was a little rude there. Thanks.
Thanks, Jake. Who's next?
Shane Axholm, 811 Railway Street, Whitefish, Montana. I couldn't agree more. Right on the money. And also, we don't want to have another huge development like this staged in our neighborhood. We haven't got a good night's rest in 10 years over there. There's always construction noise going on. And the garbage trucks, full time. This is the kind of thing that guts Whitefish. Like, guts the town of its character, you know? Who's this serving? It's gonna turn downtown into a nightmare. It already is. Thanks.
Thanks, Shane. Further comment on this item? Joe?
Joe Courtney, 535 Colorado Avenue. Dave, you were saying that 42 parking spaces, but it's not even required?
Yeah, there's no parking requirement for commercial in the WB3.
Are you sure for, I mean,
probably direct your questions to the
if you have lodging, if you have a house, you have somebody sleeping someplace, I mean, I can see it for a business that's got day operations, everybody leaves for the day, starts another day, but when you have housing, people staying overnight for days on end, you have to have parking with a housing project.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, that this time is reserved for your comments to us, Mr. Ashley, not to the staff. So if this time is reserved for you to address the council about this issue, not address the staff about it. And if
Point
we
of order,
feel,
I don't believe so. I believe I got the right to ask staff questions too.
no, not at this stage of the process. If the mayor allows it, that's fine, but not at this stage of the process. This is reserved for addressing the council, and the council can take those questions during our deliberations to the staff.
All right, Steve, I'll move on. Thanks. So the 42 spaces, I'm just wondering, I mean, a hotel this size has got to have at least 50 people working there or more. And where are those people going to be sleeping, parking? You know, are they the ones that are going to use the 42 spots to park in the basement, or, you know, is that for guests? I don't know. So if the guests use up the 42 spaces, then where do all the workers park if there's no parking provided? Do you know where, oh, I can't ask staff that. Where's a hotel going to connect to sewer and water? What street? Central?
Craig, where are the utilities, water and sewer?
Yeah, water would connect on Central Avenue, and sewer is in the alley to the west of the project.
Thanks, Craig.
Okay, so the sewer runs down the alley then?
Yes.
Okay. The 35-foot height, looking at the pictures, the one didn't look like an elevator shaft. It does look like kind of a shed on top, maybe a bar, I don't know. From one of the pictures I looked at, it didn't look like part of the shaft. But I think once you start going up 45 feet, you're setting a precedence. Anybody else that wants to build downtown and close around there, they're going to be able to ask for the same thing. So that bothers me. When it comes to the $500,000, that bothers me too. Because if a company is really interested in helping affordable housing, they would just offer that money outside of a building project. You know, and time after time, I see it going on for over the years here in Whitefish, that somebody comes in, they want a development, they want a hotel, they want to build something, and then now they're making an offer. You know, we're going to give you this if you'll approve our project here. To me, that is a bribe, an outright bribe. And, you know, if somebody wants to present money or conditions or 1% beforehand or after the project gets approved, I'm all for that. But I've seen it time and time again, bribes being offered, money, things like that, don't have anything to do with the project, you know, so go for the bribe, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Who's next? Further comment this evening? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for preferably a motion one way or another so that we can engage in discussions and move us along in the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, for
It's ordinance 21-16 for the record. Yes, Frank.
As much as anything else, for purposes of discussion, I would make a motion to approve ordinance 2116, an ordinance approving the 38 Central Hotel Plan Unit Development to overlay lots 6 through 10 and block 27 and to develop a 3-story commercial building with 40 in-suite hotels, including a bar lounge at 38 Central Avenue.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Councilor Davis. Frank, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I would. I appreciate what Joe had to say and Shane as well. An in-town, in-suite, essentially hotel, has been part of our master plan and downtown master plan for any number of years. It has always been contemplated, it's always been expected, and we've always wanted it. As a community, yes, it will exacerbate what is already a crowded downtown, but that was by design. We knew that was going to happen. The community knew that was going to add to congestion downtown when they created the master plan. I think given the scale of this project and the on-site parking, which is not required, and wasn't, quite frankly, even to be expected when the master plan was put together, lo those many years ago. I think there are some community benefits to doing this. I don't think for lack of a better description, the variances that they're asking for are significant as it affects downtown. And so I've convinced myself that I'm going to vote for it. There you go.
Thank you, Frank. Any further comments from the council? I do have, considering the vote for approval, I have some recommended changes to the conditions or the findings, as well as an added condition for your consideration, but I'll wait till you've had the opportunity to comment. Rebecca, and then Steve.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I was hoping I could just ask a couple more questions of staff.
Absolutely.
Because I wanted to hear the presentation.
Sure.
Yep. Okay, so one of them is about the dredging, Craig. And so Karen said that next spring it would be better to do that before the runoff. But, so I'm assuming that's what you're going to do with this money, is dredge Riverside Pond? Or is there a different kind of improvement that you're doing with this donation?
No, this funding would be intended to go towards the restoration of Riverside Pond.
With the dredging?
Correct.
Okay. Yay, thank you. I know I'm kind of like a dog with a bone sometimes about that, but, and then, what about the parking? Like, this came up with the firebrand, and we were promised employee parking, and so I know downtown there's no parking requirements, so we're getting 42, but we might, where would we put parking if there's no potential to go underground with the parking? Has that been identified whatsoever?
Nope, they have not identified that. That's just a condition. They would have to find a location for that many parking spaces off-site where they could valet cars to. And again, we don't have any requirement for any other commercial business in downtown to provide parking for their employees or for their customers.
And I guess the last one is, when the Firebrand was built, I thought that was our boutique hotel.
I mean, that was pitched as a boutique hotel in the downtown, just not
was.
at this specific location where the downtown master plan called for it to be.
So now we'll have two in our downtown core, even though our downtown master plan called for one.
Potentially.
Okay. Okay, I guess that's all I need. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Steve, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to, Dave, PUD is different from a CUP in that in a PUD, we have to, the developer, the applicant has to show that there is a clear and significant public benefit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Have we ever had any donations this large to, as a not required donation?
Yeah, not to my knowledge.
Okay, I'm just wondering. And the parking is valet, right? It's not.
Yep.
And it's not going to.
It's all valet parking.
This might be more for Mr. Averill, but it's it's scheduled to be all valet. It's not going to be employee parking. And then the question I have though is, how do we determine whether it's if it has to go off site? What skin do we have in the game for determining whether it's appropriate for them to be shuttling cars there for valet parking?
I mean, it would obviously have to be in a location where that would be an allowed use, and, I mean, I don't know. You could set a distance requirement, but I don't know how you do that, unless they have some ideas. Hopefully, they'll be able to put the parking underground.
I get that, hopefully, but it just seems like there's a lack of a backup plan if that falls through. And we don't really have any metric for determining how close is close enough, or, I mean, if they're driving them all the way out to the lodge, which I could anticipate happening, then, you know, we're exacerbating our traffic problem. So I'd like to see a way that we could deny that. I don't know if that's one of your conditions, Mr. Mayor, but
It's not.
I think we need to have a clearer picture of where the parking goes if it's not available to be on site. And I'm not sure exactly how to do that, which I'm sure most people aren't. But other than that, with my comments, it's time for my comments. I see this as I don't see this as something that is going to destroy our downtown. I look at development proposals like this as what is the highest and best use of the property. And I mean, that lot has been vacant as long as I've lived here. And to put a hotel there that drives more commerce to our downtown core, I don't think is a bad idea. And that's something that our downtown business owners probably applaud. It'll be nice to have another restaurant downtown. Will it increase the human traffic downtown? Absolutely. And I think that's been one of the goals of our city for a long time, is to increase human traffic in our downtown core so that our businesses can survive. I also understand it's going to be a major nightmare during construction, and I hope that we can find a way to mitigate that as much as possible. Maybe the mayor has some ideas on that. I don't know if your conditions cover that either, but I'm setting you up here, John. And the public benefit here is not something that should be taken lightly. I do understand the history of this particular developer and what we've gone through with this developer. And there has also been some public benefit, not just some significant public benefit. And there is an ongoing commitment from them to continue to provide that public benefit, as well as a pretty hefty down payment to get our snow lot affordable housing project going, which has been stagnated and in a quagmire for a long time. So evaluated in all of those different, through all those different lenses, I really I find myself wanting to approve this project. So that's where I am.
Thanks, Steve. Further comments from the council? Andy?
I would actually like to make a friendly amendment, add a 20-second condition. This is something we deal with. We dealt with a little bit of firebrand, although not too much, but we certainly have had issues at Casey's, and we know noise, and we hear problems all the time, and I would like to add a 20-second condition, and my motion would be that condition would be there would be no live or outdoor music allowed on the outside deck on the roof.
And that includes amplified music?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and that would be added friendly amendment condition number 22. We'll go ahead and vote on that amendment before the original motion. Frank?
I'll second it.
Seconded, thank you. Needed that. With that said, we'll vote on the friendly amendment. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that does carry unanimously. Michelle, anything further, Andy?
I mean, I guess just a couple quick comments. I mean, we have envisioned this application for this particular lot. I have to agree with Steve. It is the highest and best use for this property. What we've typically seen downtown is some amount of retail on the ground floor and then very expensive short-term rentals over the top. And I don't want to see that again on this lot. And I think given the price of property downtown, that's probably our other option. And nobody's going to want that because nobody wants any more short-term rentals either. And so I happened to be in the Northern the night that Marcus collapsed, so I can tell you it's been a very long time. We all walked outside about 10 o'clock, I believe it was a Saturday night, and we watched the roof cave in. We didn't really have open container laws, I don't think then, did we, Bridger? So we were able to stand out there and drink beer. It was quite a sight, and it's been not an eyesore, not maybe quite as bad as the Larry and Tykes building forever, but something does need to happen here, and it is something that we planned for in our master plan. Both times, both in the first iteration in 2005 and again in 2015. I agree with Joe and I agree with Jake. It does put more pressure downtown, but again, that is kind of what we want. And if I look through the letters in our packet, pretty much every business owner downtown said, yeah, this is something we would like to see happen. And they're the people that deal with a lot of that pressure and employees and everything else. One quick comment on the parking. I mean, I'm comfortable with the way the conditions are written for the parking. In the end, they have to provide 42 usable spaces for this building. I don't know how we would ever come up with some sort of matrix that would say this is too close or too far. I don't know really how we do that. If people are gonna have to wait for a half hour when they call their car and they're parked over in Columbia Falls, my guess is they're probably not gonna do that. Lodge is certainly another possibility, but I think they don't have a ton of parking there either. It generally looks pretty full when I go by there, so, you know, my hope is that it is provided on site. How we would make any other arrangement in the conditions to ensure that it's within a block or 2 blocks or 3 blocks or 5 blocks, I don't know what that distance is, and I don't know how we do that, so.
Thank you, Andy. Anything further from the council? I have a few items. Rebecca?
Wondering if we could have a bond attached to this project, Craig. What I am worried about water trespassing onto adjacent properties since we have underground offices across the street and all through the downtown area. And so what if someone, because this is a 2-story excavation and that water gets pushed onto someone else's property and destroys their capacity for using a basement? Can we bond it, or how does that work?
You know, that really would become more of a civil violation between property owners, not something the city typically gets involved in. I mean, it would be no different than, you know, a residential home going in, you know, somewhere in town and affecting. We would obviously help facilitate, you know, the communication between the neighbors, but that really isn't a violation the city would get involved in.
We can't guarantee that this will actually keep water from other adjacent properties then?
Not for a private project. We'd bond for our own project, you know, and we'd have insurance and bonding through performance standards with our contractor, and I assume, you know, they would do the same with theirs, but it's not something the city would manage on a private project.
Yeah, we don't, Rebecca, we don't. That's kind of you know, between the adjacent landowners and the developer. We would definitely get involved if it were a public nuisance, but we don't get involved with, you know, adjoining
Okay, thanks,
landowners.
you guys. Could I ask a question of the builder about that? Like, do you mind if I call them back up?
Sure.
Builder? How is that structured so that you don't harm someone else's property if this fails?
There's many ways to do that with foundations these days. You can build down into the groundwater as far as you want. It just is very expensive to build as a company. So we're working already with geotechnical engineers, structural engineers here in town. We know where the groundwater sits currently, and we're very comfortable moving forward, and we'll be able to provide underground parking, which is one story, not two.
But you're also displacing water to do that, correct?
Correct, and that's exactly, but it will not encroach on neighboring properties. We'll make sure to do it the correct way. These plans are very much in their infancy, but obviously we'll make sure to do the right thing, and preliminary results show that it won't be an issue at all.
What is the groundwater level at? Like how far down?
16 to 18 feet currently.
16 to 18 feet?
Yes, and we need 12 feet for our underground parking structure.
Is that the adjusted high groundwater elevation?
Yes.
All right. I know I should trust engineering more. My dad was a civil engineer, but I think of all the things that can go wrong, and I just want to prevent it. So, okay, thank you.
As do we. We're very invested in
I know.
protecting this
I
community.
know, but it's still scary.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm going to jump in here. So I'd like to I can't make and motion an amendment, but I'm throwing this out for consideration for the council to consider. I'd like to make an amendment to condition number 19, which currently reads, the applicant shall be required to provide a yearly accounting to the city of the proceeds of the voluntary 1% tax and where the money is donated/spent towards workforce housing for 5 years from the date of certificate of occupancy approval. I would like to suggest an amendment for your consideration that would amend the condition, and this addresses the public benefit and also our need for a continuous stream of revenue for affordable housing. I would like to see the 1% assessment codified in perpetuity as part of that condition of approval, and I'd like to frame the language of this finding similar to how we collect the resort tax revenue or this condition. So I'll go ahead and read the suggested language for condition number 19. The applicant shall collect a 1% voluntary assessment from all goods and services sold by the hotel and restaurant. The assessment collected in any month are to be remitted as a donation to the Whitefish Housing Authority on or before the 20th day of the following month, or if such day falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday, then on the next business day. And this again is framed up identical to how we currently collect our resort tax revenues in town. Ben?
So moved.
Is there a second to the motion? I saw Rebecca's hand, seconded by Councilor Norton. Further discussion?
Yeah, I offer my opinion. I'm glad you brought that up because I was about to say something similar. My experience with housing so far is that it's very hard to solve the problem at the peak of the real estate cycle. And you've heard me up here numerous times talking about the need for a continuous source of funding for housing initiatives here in town. Given that the community benefit that is conveyed to the developer is in perpetuity, I do scratch my head as to why it's currently written as 5 years. So I would support this as being written for in perpetuity. I think that's a very important part of this community benefit that's being offered here, and that's what I feel would be equitable to pass this project.
Okay.
Can I address that?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to address your question because I asked that very question at the planning board meeting, and Mr. Averill, and I tried to case it in terms of what they do at the lodge at Whitefish Lake, and there's not a requirement, if I understand correctly, there's not a requirement that they donate 1% to the Whitefish Lake Institute from the lodge, but they've continued to do it since they started operation. So the 5 years was just, as Sean alluded to in his comments earlier, the 5 year was not that they were only going to do it for 5 years. is that the first 5 years, it was going to go towards the snow lot, to the housing authority to help create the snow lot housing. And then the plan, according to what Sean said at the planning board meeting, was that it was going to continue, but they didn't want to lock themselves into having to donate it to one specific project. At least that was my understanding from the planning board. Is that correct, Sean? That the 5 years was just to get that project going and try to make it happen. And then beyond that, they would continue to donate the money without being required to do it. I don't see any problem with requiring it, but the plan was not to only do the money for 5 years, but it was to do it in perpetuity because it's the right thing to do.
The way this is framed up, though, Steve, it requires it in perpetuity. It codifies it within the decision. Thanks. Further comments? Again, this would be an amendment to condition number 19. Frank?
Just clarification, and I'm, given Steve's discussion, I read your amendment to this that the 1% is going to be donated towards workforce housing for 5 years. It's not to a particular project. This donation is not directed at a particular project. The $500,000, I agree, is, as I understand it and as I read this. So I don't think your concerns about being dedicated to a particular workforce housing project for only 5 years is concerned. This is to go to workforce housing project from the get-go, and it will be ongoing, is the way it would be drafted now. So it's not a function of restricting it to any particular workforce project. It's for workforce project. Okay.
And this language, just for the record, was also vetted by Dana, Angie, as well as Dave Taylor.
Yeah, great.
They're comfortable with it. Dana?
And Jen, I just wanted to let the council know, we've been working with the Housing Authority on the Snow Lot project, and while I appreciate that, they identified this early on as the $500,000, that was prior to my discussions with them regarding our American Rescue Plan dollars to help see that project through, and that'll be something that comes on your next agenda. So I prefer it not being identified as the snow lot in this situation because that $500,000 payment is at building permit issuance, and we might need those funds for the snow lot project well in advance of that time frame. So if this doesn't go through or they decide not to build the project, we're not going to sit and wait on that funding for the snow lot. So that'll be a request coming to council. So the snow lot project is not contingent on this PUD.
Ben?
Just to make sure I'm completely clear on the language, it does specify the funds for the 1% go to the Whitefish Housing
That's correct.
Authority to use as they see fit.
That's correct.
Great.
Yep. All those in favor of the changes to condition number 19, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously. And then finally, I would suggest the council consider adding condition number 23, which requires or states no real estate offices or professional offices shall be operated as street-level storefronts within the building on either Central Avenue, or East First Street. I believe this condition will address the retail loop concept contemplated in the updated downtown business district master plan, which calls for the expansion of retail west into the railway district. And I still contend that real estate offices don't really further that goal compared to retail uses. So that would be a condition that I would suggest you consider in motion.
So moved.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? Rebecca?
Can we restrict trade like that?
Yes.
I mean.
Yes.
Oh, we can?
Yep.
Angie? Do we?
Like, for example, real estate offices are not prohibited on Central Avenue on the front storefronts, I should say.
Oh, okay, I see what
so,
you're saying
yep.
then. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All those in favor of adding condition number 23, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, which brings us back to the original motion for approval, which again will include an amendment to condition number 19. Andy's added condition number 22, which requires no amplified music permitted on the rooftop patio. And then again, the condition we just voted on regarding real estate and professional offices. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, Michelle. Thanks everyone for attending, your comments this evening. And we're going to go ahead and take a quick recess. We'll reconvene at about 9:20. We're going to go ahead and get started. If folks could take their seats and wrap up their conversations, please. Okay, we're going to move on to item 6C of our agenda, which is resolution number 21-44, a resolution approving fees for various services provided by the Planning and Building Department. Wendy,
All right.
thanks.
I will talk fast. This is kind of on the heels of the adoption of the updated subdivision regulations. We had a couple of new review processes that we didn't have any fees for, but we know we're going to expend staff time and resources. So one of those is the expedited subdivision, and as you'll recall, it was going to be a little bit more involved than a minor, but a little bit less than the majors. We selected a fee for both the preliminary plat and final plats in the middle. The second review that you folks added that was part of state law update was a phased subdivision review. We will be required to notice the neighbors, put a legal in the paper, do a staff report, and hold a public hearing before you folks, so we suggested a fee for that one as well. We started to see a few accessory structures at architectural review that are less than 600 square feet or less, or 600 square feet or less. Currently, our standard is above 2,500 or below 2,500, and the below 2,500 is just a little excessive for some of these smaller buildings, so we're recommending a $250 review fee. When folks need to record their CCNRs to develop condominiums, they have to get a letter from our office saying that they either have gone through subdivision review or exempt from subdivision review, and that's one of the items that they record when they go down to the county, and that takes some time, and we haven't been charging at all, and we've been reviewing a considerable amount of those. It's kind of all the projects downtown, the new ones. And then finally, 2 major amendment fees to just have 50% of the standard fee. Currently for a conditional use permit, we make them pay the full fee and they still have to come back. But a lot of that work's already been done. So we're recommending 50% because we still have to do a staff report and notice the neighbors, go to public hearings. And then just to be consistent, we're also suggesting the same thing for PUD major amendments. Kind of like the Caro Avenue one that came back before you, they would have paid just a 50% fee. So that's all I have. Can I answer any questions for you?
Steve, thanks, Wendy.
I see that our short-term rental application fee is $100. Is that something that was not discussed in this update of fees?
I think that's coming before the council. This is just the existing fee schedule as it is today with the new ones added in. So there's no change to the short-term rental one.
Thank you.
Dana?
The short-term rental fees will come forward on November 15th.
Further questions for Wendy on her staff report? Thanks, Wendy. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6C of the agenda, which is resolution 21-44. Any public comment tonight? I'll go ahead and close any public comments.
It doesn't have the number on here. Hi, I'm Susan Okonsky. I live at 1035 State Park Road, and I wanted to offer some opinions on the recycling that you're considering.
Actually, Susan, do you mind until I call that next hearing? This is related to our fee schedule for planning and building.
Oh, I thought you went to D.
No, not yet. Hold tight, we'll get there. Any public comment on this item? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. Steve?
Make a motion that we approve resolution number 21-44, resolution approving fees for various services provided by the Planning and Building Department.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously. And we'll move on to item 6D, which will be ordinance 21-17, an ordinance amending Title IV, Public Health and Safety, Chapter 2, Solid Waste of the Whitefish City Code, and this will be on a first reading. Craig.
Good evening again.
Good evening.
Finally, the long-awaited staff report on recycling. I will preface this with just by letting council know that there is a subsequent agenda item for awarding a contract for potential curbside recycling. I've drafted the staff report to handle both the changes, which will be the changes to code, which will be in the ordinance, as well as the proposed contract with Republic. So I think you can probably expect to hear comments from the public on both of those. I know that this is really loud. This is probably I believe the third time we've discussed this at a council or a work session, so some of this may be familiar, but for the benefit of the public that's here, I'm going to kind of start from the beginning on this project. The city does currently operate a central recycling site, which is located at the corner of Columbia Avenue and Railway Street. It is available to City of Whitefish property owners and businesses. This program of a single centralized site for recycling suffers from overuse and contamination, with excess cardboard and garbage routinely being stacked by the containers. To further complicate matters, the property where the site is located is now owned by the Whitefish Housing Authority, and the recently executed solid waste contract with Republic does not currently include recycling services. One of the strategies adopted in the Climate Action Plan is to implement a single-stream residential curbside recycling program. Implementing a committed and thoughtful single-stream curbside recycling program can have substantial positive impacts on the community through waste diversion, reduction in contamination associated with multi-stream recycling, and supporting community participation. Based on council's interest in continuing to provide recycling services for the community and the possibility of adding curbside recycling, staff was directed to advertise for bids back in January. Bids were accepted for 2 separate and distinct services with the intention of moving forward with one of the 2 options. Option 1 included the management of a new central recycling site, and option 2 was for biweekly collection of residential curbside recycling. Both options do include the acceptance of number 1 and 2 plastics, flattened cardboard, paperboard, aluminum, tin, steel cans, newspapers, magazines, office papers, junk mail, etc. Responses were received from 3 different contractors and presented to council back on April 19th of this year. At that point, council directed staff to advertise for a public hearing to solicit input from the public on proceeding with a curbside program. That first public hearing was held on May 17th, and comments were taken from the public. Although there were only 8 comments received, 4 in writing and 4 spoken, comments at that public hearing were generally in support of proceeding with the program. So following that public hearing, council directed staff to begin negotiating a contract with Republic, which we did. That decision was based on several factors. 1, the program will likely result in a higher probability of capturing recycling, which speaks directly to the goals spelled out in the Climate Action Plan. A curbside program can address contamination caused by individual customers much more effectively than a central site. And thirdly, as opposed to the central recycling site, the curbside collection program will not require construction and maintenance of any new infrastructure. So the draft contract, along with the proposed changes to the solid waste code, were discussed last month at a work session on the 20th of September. Discussions revolved around the challenges of implementing the new program. And at the end of the work session, staff was directed to advertise for a second public hearing, which is where we are now, to consider the adoption of an ordinance to add curbside recycling to the solid waste code. The public hearing was advertised twice in the last 2 weeks in the Whitefish pilot, as well as mailed directly to all utility customers. Included in this packet is both the ordinance outlining the changes to the solid waste code along with the current draft of the proposed contract with Republic Services. So there's several factors to consider when deciding how to move forward with this project. Likely the most difficult change is in the switch to recycling via curbside is going to be the additional container required to run the program. Single-family homes with alley collection will likely be faced with a new 96-gallon rollout cart. While some may have room to store these in their garage or some enclosure, many residents will struggle with this new requirement. Since the containers will take several months for delivery, we're recommending a start date of April 15th, so next spring for this new program. I think that'll allow us time to receive the new containers and also not burden residents with a brand new cart to deal with in the middle of a snow season. Waiting until next spring will also allow time to educate the public, finalize and order containers, and not burden customers during the snow season. The next issue will be how to differentiate between residential and commercial. The current proposal is for residential service only, and there has been some concern expressed regarding commercial businesses. Since different businesses produce vastly different volumes of recyclable materials, it's not possible to determine a standard unit rate for billing, and that's why they're not included in this program. Commercial customers wishing to recycle still have the option to contract directly with Republic Services or any other entity offering recycling services, as many businesses currently do. The draft contract defines residential units as all single-family homes, duplexes, townhomes, condominiums, and apartments, and unless the Public Works Director or its designee determines in writing that it's impractical or impossible to establish a collection area in accordance with the property's conditions of approval. So the intent there is obviously to capture as much residential recycling as possible, but still be flexible enough to work within each property's individual constraints. Another factor to consider, which has really, I think, become a popular issue lately, is contamination. Republic Services has stated that properly disposed recycling should be free of food residue. However, we know that contamination of recyclable materials is sure to be an issue. This creates an obvious concern about bear attractants in city streets and alleys, and something we definitely need to consider when proceeding with this curbside program. Billing and education are a couple other concerns that should probably be discussed. The intention is to add a single line item for recycling to each garbage customer. However, the city is still in the process of taking over billing services from Republic and not currently in the best position to assume these additional challenges. Creating a mandatory single-stream curbside program will also be a new endeavor, and it's going to take a thoughtful planning process to ensure its success. The contract does state that Republic shall prepare and pay for educational materials on a quarterly basis, which will be distributed by the city. So the first year cost in the proposed contract is $6.25 per month for each stop. This equates to $75 per year, and it is proposed to be mandatory regardless of use. The monthly cost does not include the administrative fee, which the city has yet to come up with, but that would come in a subsequent public hearing when we determine final fees. It should also be noted that Republic Services continued to operate the current central recycling site, even though it's not in their current contract. Due to the lengthy process to implement this new program, Republic is requesting an addendum or an MOU to continue to operate the site while we get this contract in place. They've offered to continue providing hauling costs at no cost to the city, or hauling services at no cost to the city, but they are proposing the city cover the processing fees of the current central recycling site. It's going to be on average about $2,500 to $4,500 per month. So based on the direction of council, staff does recommend a public hearing be held to solicit comments on these changes to the solid waste code, as well as the proposed contract with Republic. Pending the outcome of the public hearing, council may wish to adopt the ordinance and award the contract or proceed with a different option, and we're here to help with either.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions for Craig? We'll start with Steve.
Craig, I noticed in the contract that there is a section about excluded materials, but I did not see any sort of fee schedule, and we had talked about that at one of our meetings, that, you know, if Republic realizes that you have put stuff in there, it's not cleaned or whatever it is, maybe you put trash in your recycling instead, and they discover it, it says that they won't take it, but then what happens on our end?
Yeah, I don't know that it would result in necessarily in a fee, but it would contaminate the load and likely result in landfilling of recyclable materials. So I don't know that we intended to fine individual property owners, but if that's something we want to talk about, it could obviously go, I think it would more likely go in the the code changes than in the contract, but that's something we should probably discuss if we want to be fining
Okay.
individuals.
Well, because right now, in the contract, it says that if they discover it at the, before they dump it in the truck, they just will leave the can there full of whatever is there, and they won't pick it up. And if they discover it later, after it's already been dumped in, they're not gonna know who put it in there, but then they're gonna charge the city to haul it to the landfill. And they'll probably just haul the whole entire contaminated load. So I just was, I mean, we had, and then, I mean, we don't have anything in there if there's repeat violators, what happens to those people that continue to not take care of their recycling? Do we just take them off of the list? I don't quite understand.
I would think so. I mean,
And then they
they're
still have
still
to
going
pay
to
the
pay for it, but they're not going to
$625?
get the service. Yeah, we probably need to add language about that.
Okay, just because it's not like regular trash, I mean,
Right.
yeah, so, okay. Thanks, and then, right now, so this would be, right now, as it's written, it would be required, correct?
Correct.
And if you live in the city right now, you're required to contract with Republic Services, is that correct, too?
For solid waste, for garbage, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions for Craig before we hold our public hearing? Ben?
I just had one brief one. There were several public comments that seemed to say that plastics weren't included, or unless I read that wrong. Was there some misunderstanding there? Plastics are certainly included.
Yeah, there was a mistake that in the public hearing announcement itself did not say plastics, but it is intended that plastics will be included in this service. Yeah, number 1 and number 2 plastics.
Rebecca?
So we've had a lot of comments about not initiating our recycling program until we get the bear problem dialed in. And because we will exacerbate the problem with the bears. And this is coming from the people that go and catch the bears. And so they're worried about us creating a dangerous situation by proceeding. Like someone could get mauled, you know, or something like that. And I also spoke to someone recently, Rhonda actually, and she was listening to a conversation with Fish and Wildlife people, and they said that Whitefish and Big Fork are the worst in terms of bear activity because we have so many short-term rentals that people leave the trash out in it, and that's an attractant. And in the county and in the city as well. And so if we put our plan on hold, how does that mess up the contracting until we figured that out? Because I keep hearing it over and over from the people that manage the bears and from people that are dealing with bears in town, that maybe we should actually deal with the bear problem and then move into recycling.
So the bid did go out as a 3-year contract. And so if we put it on hold and started a year later, we'd likely just begin with the 2nd-year pricing. You know, I think it's something we'd likely have to negotiate with Republic in the contract when the start date is. You know, I think the intention when it was bid was that we would move forward, you know, as soon as possible, but if there's ancillary issues that, you know, require us to table this, I think Republic will be here when we're ready. But yeah, I mean, the price is going to go up for a subsequent year.
And I would also add that our central recycling site that's located on the property now owned by the Whitefish Housing Authority for the snow lot development, we currently, Republic is currently servicing that without a contract for us at no charge, but they have requested to negotiate a contract to have the city pay for that service now. If this is delayed, we likely, just based on construction of the snow lot, will likely not have a central recycling site for a certain amount of time. I will say on the short-term rental ones, that's being addressed in the language changes to our code regarding the requirement of a animal-resistant container for all short-term rentals.
And then, Dana, when will all of the short-term rentals be required to have an animal-proof container then?
That language change is headed to the planning board at their next meeting in November, and then comes to council, and then if it's adopted, it'll be like
December.
January, I think, isn't that be required after 30
Yeah,
days? Yeah.
That could help within the city, it won't probably help in the county, but we're not responsible for the county. Okay, thanks. I just needed to bring it up because I keep hearing it over and over and over, and last night I watched this video on Facebook of Rachel Manley and Tim capturing these huge grizzlies, and we've had one in town, and I thought, we don't want to get more grizzlies in town. We need to actually, like, listen to the people that do this for a living. So as long as we have that plan in place and we can approve it, I think it'll be okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Further questions for staff? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6D, which is ordinance 21-17. We'll hold that public hearing now. It's getting a bit late. We've been here since 5, so if you can try and limit your comments to 3 minutes, we would certainly appreciate it.
Joe Courtney, 535 Colorado. At this point, I'm kind of against the recycling, paying for recycling curbside. I think that there's so many hundreds and thousands of people coming into this town that the citizens of Whitefish basically have to pay for that recycling of all those people coming into town. You know, where I think if we did, like I said earlier, say a 0.5% tax, you know, on services in town, I think that would more than pay for the recycling program itself, you know, to still have a place where people can go. Right now, at home, we separate all our recycling, and now you're asking me not to do that, throw it all in one big garbage can, which, of course, my cardboard, I'm gonna have to sit there, big boxes, and cut them all up and try to fit everything in there. I mean, you know, if you take away the recycling place that we have, where do I put all the cardboard? Where do I, you know, you're gonna have to pay somebody to separate everything when it gets down to Republic, you know, because now you're tossing everything into one garbage can. Doesn't sound very good to me. I know a lot of other towns, they have 2 or 3 garbage cans, different ones for different things, newspaper, plastic, etc. It doesn't sound like we're at that point yet to do that. So, I don't know, I just think we have so many people in town that the citizens should not be paying for that, but the tourists should be paying for it, or helping to pay for it. Do the staff know what the total amount of income will be coming in that will be paying Republic if everybody were to be brought into a program and pay? I mean, $625 a month, what does that relate to everybody? Have you got a total cost of what
Of course,
going to be
the
bringing
fees
in?
are intended to be self-sustaining for the program.
It's $262,000 in the first year. It's in the staff report.
That's what it's going to cost, $250,000, and you figure that with everybody, they'll make enough money coming in to pay for that $250,000? I mean, is this a break-even thing, or are we looking for a profit here to go into
We
the
assess
general
fees
fund?
based on the cost of providing service, and that's it. There's no additional profit that's taken off the top. It's just to provide the cost of service.
Okay, and you're figuring $250,000, huh?
It's in the staff report.
Okay. I guess that's it. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Joe. Who's next?
I'm Gail Lene, 106 Murray Avenue, and I'm representing myself and 7 other of my Murray Avenue neighbors. You'll see it in the letter. Their names are listed. And I've also written a personal letter on the 4th of October, which is in your packet too, along with a nice picture of our sow and her 3 cubs They're in the Peace Park, a half a block from my house, whose garbage I picked up for 8 people 2 weeks ago. We are really concerned about the bears that frequent our city because I have to put my garbage out at 6:30 in the morning because our garbage comes at 7, the garbage guy. Then I'm looking at black on black. It's dark out, and those 4 bears are dark. I'm not afraid of bears. I grew up in this valley, but nonetheless, I have a very high respect for bears, and I've seen what they've done. I have researched a lot with Fish, Wildlife, and Game. They have a number of beautiful pamphlets. This is a dated one, but it's a very good one, and any of you can go and pick up materials from them. I'm developing a packet of information that can become an app that can be given to anybody in the city that they can hit and learn how to be bear aware, because we need to not have 17 bears and 1 grizz right in our town. I have grandchildren. Bears remember where they find food, as you all know. Once they're fed, they return, and that's where I got my sow. Last year, she was a yearling, and she was in apple trees in my yard, and she came back this year with her triplets. So they present a problem. It's easier to repair that problem to start with than to try to make up the difference. Bears' territory is about 50 miles. So if you remove a bear, they know where to come back to. They know where our garbage cans are. They will return. And then the trouble is, they could be a dead bear. So a fed bear is a dead bear. And that's my concern with, and our concern, with curbside recycling. When I picked up those 8 cans, and our neighbors were already working on this project, I thought, until we have what I sat here and we were promised to have in 2014, bear-resistant cans, we have no business considering curbside recycling if it's open. I can't see where the sense in that is. You know, even if we get latches on our cans, I don't care, charge me $500 for a latch on my can so I don't have to go out at 6:30 in the morning with the bears. If then you've got a can beside it that is open, it won't work. I read the 36 letters that were presented to you about about the curbside cans, and half wanted them, half didn't want them. And often the comment was, we don't want to wash our garbage. So how are you going to educate people that they need to rinse out cans and get things prepared for curbside recycling? And don't tell me you're going to do it unlatched. Please don't tell me we're not going to have something that's covered, because we've already waited 7 years for bear-resistant garbage cans. We still don't have them on this side of the town. So we need to do something about our bears, please, before you consider anything about curbside recycling. And also, Rebecca, I really appreciate your comment to look at those people who are in this business. You know, Mr. Thompson, Mr. Weedham, who's been on national news, and Chad White have all been at my house because of our bears last year. They know bears, and we need to deal with bears first. And then let's get not just our own ideas about recycling, and I'm happy to help you with recycling. Let's talk to Seattle, Spokane, Denver, anywhere that has recycling. Are you going to tell me we're the only people that are coming up with a recycling plan? That doesn't make sense. We don't know enough ourselves. We're not scientists or health providers or whatever it would take, environmentalists who would come up with the idea with the proper cans to use. So I do appreciate that the thing is there that Mr. Workman said to consider bear-proof recycling, curbside recycling. I recycle every week. I don't mind to go to the edge of town to do it. Coram, Montana even has centralized caged-in, bear-proof, centralized recycling. We can do it too, and until such time as we've made a solution and you keep me safe on Murray Avenue, away from those 4 bears, I do not approve of curbside recycling. Please make that your first priority so that we are all safe here. You are not made a liability of someone. You've seen pictures of people, and I've known people who have been hurt by bears. You don't need the liability. We don't need being hurt. And it will also keep our bears from being relocated or worse yet, killed. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. Leo.
I'm Leo Keene, 514 Pine Place in Whitefish. Off topic first, not all of the counselors we can hear back there because the mics aren't up to their mouth.
Frank.
Mayor, you speak loudly and it's always easy to hear you, but others we don't get half the comments.
Thanks for the reminder.
Off topic, but I am in favor of, I guess I'd say central recycling staffed with the city selling subscriptions to people who are serious about recycling. We've been trying to educate people for many, many years about how to recycle, what to recycle, and when you go by the central recycling place now, it looks like a dump. It's embarrassing. And it's disgusting, really, for those of us who like to who do recycle and take it seriously. And I think Craig simplified the situation in making the difference between commercial and residential. I do a lot of commercial recycling as a builder, and I get a lot of cardboard. It comes in fits and starts. I can fill up a dump truck occasionally, or I can fill up my pickup occasionally and take it to recycling, but we can't have a dumpster on site all the time because it comes at various times during the process. It would really make it difficult for us to recycle as we like to do now, which is going to the central location. Simplifies it. And I got a feeling that if this happens, we're going to get a lot more going out to the dump, which doesn't take commercial recycling either, amazingly, which always surprises me, but a lot of cardboard is getting buried these days out at the dump. We're just going to make it harder for people to recycle cardboard. And I think it's a realistic option that we could sell subscriptions to people who really want to do the right thing. And we could afford staffing it. Have somebody there that says, this goes in this bin, this goes in that bin, this is clean, this is not clean, take it home. This is cardboard, flatten it. I think we could do that. I don't know exactly how, but we should crunch the numbers and see if that's a possibility. And keep on trying to educate the public about how to recycle, because that place is really a mess.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leo. Further public comments? Mary?
She hasn't gotten to go yet.
We won't forget her.
Okay. Okay. Mary Flowers, Citizens for a Better Flathead. And you received some of our comments earlier today, and I want to just go over some of those for the public as well as for you. And as you know, we have long been advocates of recycling, and we've participated in these hearings and appreciate the fact that Craig has really worked to address issues like where plastic recycling ends up, to ensure that we have more safeguards to make sure that we truly are recycling. However, after last council meeting with Eric Weedham here talking about the bears, we really did some deep dive into what best practices are in mountain communities, and that's part of what we provided you, extensive links in our comments for. And because of that, we are here tonight to ask you to prioritize first, getting in place bear-proof containers citywide. I went back and looked at your 2014 ordinance, and even in that ordinance, you said this is no longer just a zone issue where there's some areas where bears are more prevalent than others. It's a citywide issue, and I think that's even more true today than ever. I don't know what the cost would be to the public or to the city to ensure that we had bear-proof containers, but we've certainly provided you links to communities who have put them in citywide in similar sized towns like Aspen, et cetera. And we think, given the concerns that have been expressed on cost of programs, you've already recognized that you've got to put off your curbside recycling for a number of reasons for at least a year. And I think to put it off for a couple of years and really address your bear-proof containers is going to be critical. Safety and liability is also an issue, and I provide you a link to one case that recently came up with a fellow who just tripped trying to get away from a bear in a container. And I think that's another issue that the city needs to come to grips with. I think we provided you some excellent links to ordinances and programs that communities have put in place. And we would ask that you table tonight your decision on moving forward with this contract, recognizing that you've already done a lot of good work on it, although we will have some additional comments about the contract itself and some needs for clarification. You know, I think in the interim, moving forward with your centralized site while you're doing the bear-proof containers gives you a real opportunity to educate the public. I liked Leo's idea of making that even perhaps a subscription, because when you look what happened with the county green box sites, once they fenced and manned those sites, they are just incredibly night and day difference. And having worked at those sites, you know, trying to educate the public, having that full-time person there makes a world of difference. And I think having that temporary, if not permanent, transition to a common recycling site off of Monacan, as you've talked about in the past, is feasible. It can be bear-proofed, and it gives you the opportunity to really educate the public. I recognize that the Climate Action Committee feels like you can collect more, a higher percentage of recycling by going curbside, but there's also a higher percentage of contamination. And Ruben's going to speak here in a minute to some of the issues in your contract with who pays for that, dealing with that contamination. So I think I'll close at that, but hope that you will make this a priority. And I know that it's kind of us coming to you kind of with a significant change in our position, but I think from what we heard last council meeting and given the research I've presented you, it's something that council should give serious concern to. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Hello again for the 5th time. I'm Susan Okonsky. I live at 1035 State Park Road in Whitefish. And I love Mr. Workman's comments about the difficulties of doing the recycling, especially at the central site. Once it's contaminated and you put that in every alley that has trash can, it's going to be extremely difficult. I'm not opposed to recycling. What I am opposed to is mandatory recycling. Our largest utility bill at our home is the city of Whitefish, because we have, and that includes electric, gas, cable bill, everything, because I have a shop. The shop has a water meter, and because it has a water meter, it has $10.68 in garbage every month that I never use. I have to pay $77.33 a month for nothing. I don't use the water. I can't turn it off at the curb because I'll still get charged, or I have to return the meter, which I've already paid for, and then I'd have to repay for it sometime when I want to. So, long story, that's $77. Then the sprinkler water is $27.30. I haven't even heard how. That's another thing to people's home is the mandatory. If this does happen, is it only attached to bills that have water and sewer and not sprinkler bills, right? So that's another, $27. I use maybe 50 gallons in the beginning of the spring, never use it the whole rest of the time. I pay over $100 every month just for water and a garbage can that I don't use. And then I have our house. That's the bill that we actually use water. So now, if we go to mandatory, and it's $6.25, but that doesn't include the administrative fees yet. It doesn't include how much Republic is going to charge for all the contaminated containers that then we're going to have to pick up, extra pickups for them. And I could see it being more than that, which to me then, if you do include the sprinkler water, to me, let's say it's $7. That's an extra $21 a month. When I personally recycle, but I go to the dump, I go to Quorum. If I'm going to Columbia Falls for some business thing, I pile it in my car, I drop it off at their green box site. There's many ways for people to take care of it if they really want to without mandating it for every single person in the city. And then it would probably be, as Craig was speaking, a multi-year contract. So for that 3 years, I can be guaranteed I'm going to be paying for, and who knows how much it'll really be once we figure out administrative fees. And as they've already mentioned, the city's really not ready, since we're taking over the trash in his statements, to add something else to administratively to the city. And then I'm wondering, I just heard the Monaghan Road thing, and I had family business, so I wasn't here at the very beginning of the year when all this really started, so I couldn't enjoy everyone's comments about it. But besides Monaghan, have we looked at other city places, like for a permanent place, or even a temporary in the meantime, like part of the parking lot up by the police department, or asking Super One Foods or the mall if they'd allow it in the back, or something like that as an option. So we could still keep our contract, but again, we'll still have the contamination problem. And then I wonder, is it, from a climate standpoint, which I think how this all started, the Climate Action Committee, is it really less impactful to do that than to have this truck, or multiple trucks, I'm not even sure, driving all over the city, picking up individual plastic containers that might be contaminated? Is it really less expensive? So I could see it going over the $262,000 per year. So again, I'm not opposed to it, recycling at all. I do it myself. It's just I don't think it should be another mandatory expense to every single property owner in the city that's on the city bills.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
Good evening. My name is Ruben Castron, also with Citizens for Better Flathead. I want to preface these comments by saying that our organization's preferred position is what Mary has brought up. However, if you do choose to move forward with this contract tonight, there are a few amendments that we would really like you to address before doing so. I apologize I did not get these submitted before 4 p.m., but if it's all right, I have a handout that I can pass out at the council that outlines these.
Thanks.
These recommended changes to the contract attempt to address the issue of public education and outreach, financial obligations in the contract, as well as the final destination of this material. While the comments I presented are in order they appear on the contract. I think for the sake of time, because we are after the siren, I can go over them and issue they try to address, and it'll be a little more efficient. So the issue of public education is somewhat paramount to a successful curbside recycling program. In researching this contract, I spoke with a private company who does curbside in Bozeman, as well as the Bozeman Solid Waste District, as well as the city of Aspen, a city of similar size that has severe human-bear interactions, and a curbside recycling program. And all three noted the need to make sure that the public and the residents knew what material was allowed to go in and knew that they needed to clean the material of contaminated material such as food waste before it went into these single stream recycling bins. It's estimated that over a quarter of all material collected through single stream recycling is contaminated and ends up in the landfill. And the only way to really combat that is to make sure that people who are depositing that waste know exactly what can go in there. If you look at Section 9 of the contract, the company is already required to submit quarterly reports regarding the collection, removal, and disposal of material. Increasing the amount of knowledge and data we get from those reports would allow for targeted public outreach and education. So you can see a recommended amendment to that contract is to simply require the company to provide figures pertaining to the amount of excluded waste collected from different quadrants, neighborhoods, or collection routes inside the city. Going down in Section 13 of the contract, it looks at when excluded waste is discovered at the depositor's site, and rather than simply finding that depositor, we've added language to encourage the city, or to direct the city to educate that depositor about exactly what can and cannot go into those bins. The final part of the public outreach where we think there would be a benefit if it was amended is under Appendix A, Section 2.8. Using that information gathered in those quarterly reports, the city and the company should collaborate with organizations providing outreach in the city and local schools to create targeted educational programs to address this issue. This is essentially just the action item on information gathered from reports produced by the company. The second issue is the financial obligations that were brought up earlier in questions with staff. I would like to make sure the city is aware that as the contract currently reads, the city is on the financial hook for the cost of disposing of excluded waste if it's discovered after collection. This is stated several times throughout the contract. It's first addressed on Section 13, page 269 of your packet. Essentially there it says that as it currently reads, it's the company's sole discretion to charge the city for the removal of excluded waste. We've amended that to remove the city. They can charge the depositor if they're able to be located, and if not, if you go to Appendix A, Section 2.1, it posits the responsibility on the company to dispose of that excluded waste. Not making this change essentially leaves an open-ended budget item in the city where you are potentially at risk of having to haul an unknown amount of material from probably Pacific Steel down in Kalispell back up to the dump, which could, especially if the public education and outreach programs aren't fully up and running and there is a lot of excluded waste being put in, could run a fairly hefty bill. The other thing is that it's currently the company's job to produce and pay for public education material, and the organization that is responsible for paying for the education of the public should also be responsible if the public is ill-informed. This is just sort of a more conducive financial incentive structure to make sure that the company, Republic in this situation, is doing all they can and doing it effectively to educate the residents on what can and cannot go into these recycling containers. So we really encourage you to make those changes. I will note there's a typo in this on Exhibit A 2.1. If the items delivered to MFR/recyclable drop-offs is crossed out, that should not be crossed out, but that line should read, if items delivered to MFR recyclable drop-off locations are rejected and must be disposed of as trash, the company is responsible for the disposal of these items. The final issue I want to address is the final destination of materials, as brought up in previous public comment, as well as sort of some other discussion of single stream recycling, is making sure that materials are actually recycled. The contract currently dictates on page 273 of your contract, it's Exhibit A 1.4, or 273 of your packet, Exhibit A 1.4 of the contract, that the materials, essentially, it's heading down to Kalispell and then getting shipped off to the Smart Center over in Spokane. I spoke with an operations manager at the Smart Center, and they are committed to shipping exclusively into domestic markets for material, which is essentially as much of an assurance that you can get that the material is actually being recycled or ending up in a landfill and not being placed in an environmentally unsound situation. In my conversation with her, the Smart Center does, under extreme circumstances, ship overseas. One of those circumstances was during the COVID pandemic, when most domestic repurposing facilities were forced to close down. I encourage the city to add a line that we've recommended here, essentially reserving the right to amend the contract should these circumstances rise again, the Smart Center's business model changes, and it becomes evident that they are not shipping to domestic markets. This simply ensures that the material is actually being recycled in an environmentally friendly manner and with congruence of the goals of this whole program. The final recommendations we would make are to the actual proposed changes to city code in Title IV. The current changes under section C2, looking at A, B, C, and D, the language regarding different types of material is slightly incongruent. When dealing with cardboard, paperboard, aluminum tins, steel cans, newspapers, magazines, and catalogs and junk mail, the current language says they should be placed at the curb or alley for collection, but under section D, it dictates that numbers 1 and 2 plastic shall be placed in designated recycling bins for curbside or alley collection. I just think for clarity and making sure that residents know that all of their material needs to be put in these recycling bins for collection, that the language used in regards to 1 and 2 plastics should be the same language used for the rest of the material. Those are our comments, and I sincerely hope that they're helpful to you today. So thank you very much.
Was it Ruben?
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Further public comments tonight on this item? It's time, Matthew. Thanks.
Matthew Cinto.
Thanks for sticking around.
135 Waverly Place. I've been here for 43 plus years. I've never found so much mandated waste of money. I personally hauled my own garbage, and if I choose to recycle, which most times I do, I'll haul it to Pacific because I have appointments in Cattle Smell to take a few minutes to take it down there. They pay me for the recyclables. Why should I pay a big conglomerate money and have you guys waste your staff time, your postage, your paper, and our money because you mandate something? I'm opposed to the mandate of making us pay for recycling when not everybody recycles. It's not very consistent. I know it's a hard decision, but how about thinking of us that are on a fixed income? $7 a month, that's quite a bit of money over a long time. I pay more than that in the property taxes to the landfill itself. And I know there are many others who also do. We don't have jobs like you guys, but I still live here. I have no place else I want to go. I'm lucky I paid my place off. Not everybody else is as fortunate as that. So every time I get another tax, it's not fair, and it's not necessary, and it's very burdensome. Please do not mandate this curbside pickup. As one of the previous people said, why not move it out of wherever the snow dump area is, put it up in the police department where the rest of them are. Please. Thank you very much for the time.
Thanks, Matthew. Just for an FYI, we're all volunteers. We don't get paid. But thanks for your comments tonight. Further public comment this evening? Let's try to keep this within 3 minutes, Nathan. We're going pretty late here.
It'll be short. Nathan Dugan, 937 Kalispell Avenue.
I am I'll be the contrarian. I am for the curbside recycling program. I mean, we're talking about human behavior here. The easier you make something, the easier people are to do it, even if, or the more likely they are to do it, even if they don't do it now. I do think that we should be sensitive to the fact that there are people that may not be able to afford the extra cost, and sensitive to the fact that we don't end up pushing people out of the community because of that. And so I don't know if there's a way to structure it into the contract. Sounds like it would be pretty tricky. But I think like maybe something that could be helpful would be to allow people to opt out, maybe if they are below a certain income threshold. That sounds like it could get pretty tricky, but I'm willing to pay more. $6 to me is not that much money, so I would pay a decent amount more to have curbside recycling, because I don't like taking it down to the dump, so, or down to the central thing. It stacks up in my house, so that's it.
Thanks, Nathan. Further public comment? Al?
My name is Alan Tays, and I live at 1226 2nd Street. I just don't like the mandatory payment. I only found out about this a few weeks ago. I do not read the Whitefish pilot. And mandatory, I just don't like. And I'm going to keep it short and get out of your hair here, so.
Good to see you, Al. Thanks for coming. Shane.
Hey, next one, Whitefish, 811 Railway. I love everyone's comments. I appreciate everything everyone has said. There's only one thing that just differentiates me from anyone else, and that's that this thing is right in front of my house, and it's disgusting eyesore. I have to look out my front window at it all day, every day. So regardless of what you do, curbside pickup, just please put it in a new location. Like, nobody asked us if we want it in our neighborhood. Would you want it in front of your house? Do you want to stare at that all day? It's disgusting. People just dropping off trash all day, every day. I mean, I've seen toilets, mattresses, doors, and every manner of thing. People are just savages. They will just dump anything there if you give them a chance. Thanks.
Thanks, Shane. Couldn't have said it better myself. Further comments tonight on this item? I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council. Given the time we're at this evening, we've been here since 5 o'clock. I don't think any good decisions are going to be made tonight related to this, so I would suggest and recommend postponing to a date certain, and we can reconsider this as well as the next agenda item at our next meeting or at a date that you set.
I move that we postpone our deliberations on this, or postpone this until our November 6th meeting. Is that our next meeting?
November 1st.
November 1st meeting.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Norton. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. Are you opposed or in favor of your?
They tried to say something before.
I was just gonna let
I'm
you guys
sorry,
know
Dan.
your next agenda is not any shorter, and so
Is this
till
time-
till December.
Is this time sensitive?
It's not time sensitive on this one, but just be aware that moving forward through your next agendas for about probably the next 3 meetings, you're having significant public hearings like this coming forward. So.
Can we push it to the December 6th meeting? We've received a lot of good comments tonight, including written comments that obviously we need to pour through. I wouldn't mind postponing it out to a later date if that's okay with the 1st and the 2nd. Steve? Okay, so we'll go to December 6th. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Considering that, Angie, maybe you can help me here. Can we just go ahead and motion to postpone item 6A to the December 6th meeting as well, without holding the public hearing?
I don't think there's a public hearing actually scheduled for the contract.
Oh, 7 starts on the first page. I apologize.
No worries. So yes, I think you can postpone that as well.
Okay. I'll have a motion to that effect, please.
So moved.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Norton. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. You have Dana's report enclosed with the packet. Anything Any questions for Dana? Rebecca?
Dana, could you talk a little bit about your radio interview and the educational things that you talked about, the resort tax? Because I think there's some misconceptions in the community, and we can educate people about what the resort tax is used for, but I just wondered if you could just take a few minutes and clarify.
Yeah, sure. So during this past couple months, actually, education has been a important part of the resort tax ballot language that is out to voters right now. We can provide, obviously, education about what that means for a taxpayer. Currently, our resort tax does provide property tax relief. It provides funding for our streets, our streets, which could include the water and sewer improvements with those street reconstruction projects. It also provides funding for our parks and bike paths. And there is a new added item with the Whitefish Trail, which is the community asset with the licenses held by the city. KPAX, I believe, did a story on it, or at least they interviewed me last week. So I didn't actually watch it, but there should be some good education on that about what it means for taxpayers. The property tax relief being probably the most significant item that benefits individuals here. The extension that we're asking for is 20 years. That does not prohibit changes in the future should, say, an idea like transportation or affordable housing become a solid plan to going back to the voters, and if the community asks the council to go out for a vote, there's nothing prohibiting that in the next 20 years. So I think that there is some confusion that when this vote goes through, or whatever process it is, yes or no, it doesn't stop the council from asking voters again if a new use comes up that seems to be a good idea. So I think there was some discussion among community members that by voting for this proposal that you could not change it over the next 20 years. That is not correct. There is, the council at any time can call for a vote on resort tax. It just can't be within the same fiscal year that a vote is performed, so you'd have to wait a year. Other than that, though, I think, education's the biggest part. Read our newsletters. We did provide some of that in the last newsletter, information on resort tax, but everybody should educate them to make their determination on how to vote.
Anything further, Rebecca? Dana, anything additional to report on?
This evening.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to item 9, communications from the mayor and city councilors. We do have item 9A. We did not make the appointment earlier. We did interview for one position for the Whitefish Climate Action Plan Committee. That's my appointment that needs to get ratified by a simple majority of the council. Nick, you were up against some tough competition. Lydia has schooling and professional experience in many of the areas contemplated in our climate action plan. I'm sure you do as well. She's also a certified lead green associate and has a degree in global and environmental sustainability. So as much as I'd love to appoint you to this board, I really hope you apply for another board, because I've really appreciated your involvement at the council meetings the past several months, and I encourage you to continue to stay engaged and look for openings on other volunteer boards, and perhaps even this one if an opening does arise. With that said, I'll go ahead and motion to approve Lydia Fahrenkrug to the Whitefish Climate Action Plan Committee, and I just need a simple ratification of hands by the council. All those in favor, and that is unanimous. With that said, we'll start with comments, and why don't we start on this end tonight? Frank, you're it.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to pass this evening.
Thank you. Andy?
No comment.
Thanks, Andy. Steve?
Moving the hour, nothing.
Ben? And Rebecca?
The ballots are out. You can drop them at the city hall, and we will have election judges there on the day of the election, which is November 2nd. Just wanted people to know that you can bring them to City Hall, and I hope everybody votes. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. We do need to provide, and I hate to bring this up at this hour, but we did have a work session on our urban downtown project, and we do need to provide some direction back to staff. If you feel, Craig, it's time sensitive, otherwise we could always provide direction to you and Dana at the next meeting, but I don't want to lose our opportunity to comment and have DOT, further this project along without feedback from this governing body.
Yeah, I have the sense that they're rolling on down the road, but I don't think anything's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. I think we've got some time on it.
Would you guys like to discuss that now or wait till the November 1st meeting? You received a lot of information. I've had the privy of serving on that committee, for 2 years now. And I have some significant concerns with what's being rolled out that I'm happy to address at the next meeting. If you'd like some additional time to digest the information you received tonight.
I don't think we're gonna have any more time to discuss this in 2 weeks than we do today, or 3 weeks, whenever our next meeting is.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question? Craig, I think there is some consensus, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, that we can tell DOT with some certainty that their preferred plan is not acceptable to this council or this community. If they want further feedback from us in terms of some details, I feel pretty comfortable that we would do that in a couple of weeks. But I think it would be fair for us to, given where they are and where Craig thinks they're going with this thing, is to send not a shot across the bow, but a very strongly, he needs to inform them that this community is not going to support their preferred choice C. And so if that's what we think we're going to do ultimately, and that would be helpful to them to take them off their path a little bit and stop, then I think we ought to do that. Do you think that would be helpful, Craig?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I think if council's in a position right now to say that alternative C is not something that you support, I think we should probably tell them sooner than later. And perhaps I could draft a letter for either council's consideration or the mayor's consideration that we could send sooner than later. But this plan isn't done yet. They still have work to do on it, but I think perhaps a well-crafted letter indicating the concerns that we have on the direction this is going could do quite a bit of service to perhaps alter their course or at least bring them in line with what we're thinking.
I'd be happy to help you with that letter, Craig, as we discussed at our meeting a couple weeks ago, and certainly the council could review that if that's indeed the consensus of this body.
Yes.
I'll comment real quickly, but there's been comments tonight about this project simply adding volume and capacity, which means more vehicles and more congestion, in my opinion. And we've worked hard to create a pedestrian environment, walkability, livability in our downtown. And it included a $3 million Tiger grant, a multi-million-dollar streetscape project, as well as development of this city hall and parking structure that was all congruent with our downtown master plan. And I remain very concerned about the collateral impacts that this project's going to have to Second Street that I don't feel are being properly disclosed because of the coarseness of the illustrations. We need scale drawings. Typically with this phase of work, you would include aerial photo-based maps that have actually line drawings that show the existing and proposed curb lines, what parking stalls are being removed, what are the impacts to the bulb outs, how does the project impact the promenade that we used TIF funds to pay for in front of the firebrand, as well as our bike paths. So I remain very concerned. I don't think it's a big ask to require that level of information for this phase, because I think it's only fair to accurately qualify the collateral effects this is going to have on the downtown core. I also think it's been a bit deficient, and Craig made this point tonight, in terms of how does this plan redirect traffic to Baker and the connectivity with Baker, and I think it's kind of lacking in that information. And then, the list goes on and on. The impact to the historic district, which has been cataloged along Spokane Avenue, et cetera. So my recommendation is we draft a letter, Craig. We can circulate it amongst the council, and you're going to have to work with DOT well beyond my time So I'm happy to put my signature on that letter, or we can all sign as well, so.
Okay.
I kind of reviewed the transportation plan, and we, as a city, have not said yes to the MDT a lot of times, and so I think we really need to look at the connectivity in our own city and come up with other solutions, like having 7th, developed, or 13th Street, or, we have ways around the downtown area. But even Haskell was brought up in some of the comments about an alternative way up to the big mountain. But everybody has always said no, and so now we have all this congestion coming through downtown. So I think in order to help them, we should actually identify where we think traffic should be diverted more.
And so a parallel project we're working on is our citywide transportation plan that will
Right.
address many of the points you brought up and other members of the public tonight as well.
And then maybe put that in the letter that we are actually coming up with alternative ideas that we would like to present.
And they're aware of that, correct, Craig?
Yeah.
Okay,
So, but
yeah,
thanks
just
for the point.
because
Yeah.
I think we have to work with them so that we get this done. But, we don't want to always be perceived as saying no, 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 and then create a worse problem, I think is what I mean.
Yeah.
But
We don't, but we pushed the envelope with the downtown project, and DOT and the consulting firm earned awards for that project. So we certainly look at them as partners, and we want to push this in the right direction. So, yeah, that's right. With that said, anything further from staff? We are adjourned. Thanks.